Afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, good afternoon. Could you please call the roll?
Hardesty,
Here.
Udaly,
You know, there's something, can I just say
I
something?
can barely hear you.
We can't hear you, and I would get a little closer and just enunciate a little more, because I can't hear you either.
I thought you said Wheeler this time.
oh, that happened before.
It's
Okay.
too soon.
Yeah,
Too
just a little
soon.
louder.
Okay, my apologies. Udaly,
Here.
Fritz, Fish,
Here.
Wheeler,
Here. Thank you. Now we're going to hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. I'm just kidding, just one up is fine. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Very good, thank you. And Keelan, we're going to read the first two items together, please. Items 678 and 679.
678, inform council of the city's efforts through the Bloomberg Philanthropies American Cities Climate Challenge. 679, direct the Portland Bureau of Transportation and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to form a dedicated task force to study and recommend both near and long-term strategies for pricing for equitable mobility.
Colleagues, we're going to now hear a presentation from the joint effort from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and the Bureau of Transportation through the American Cities Climate Challenge. Portland was selected to take part in the Bloomberg Philanthropies American Cities Climate Challenge back in the fall of 2018. This is an unprecedented effort empowering 25 of the largest U.S. cities to deliver America's pledge on climate action. As we all know, Portland is and has been a climate action leader, which is a source of great pride for our community. We've made great progress on reducing our carbon emissions, but the fact remains that we still have a lot more to do. Through the Climate Challenge, we have yet another opportunity to show cities around the country and the world how to lead on tackling the climate crisis. We're accelerating our efforts over the next 2 years with our participation in the challenge and embarking on an update of Pioneer award-winning climate action planning. All of these actions support our work to reach 100% renewable energy economy and community by the year 2050. On July 17th, I'll testify in front of the Senate Democrats' Special Committee on the Climate Crisis alongside mayors from Atlanta, St. Paul, and Pittsburgh. I will relay much of the information we're about to hear about how Portland is leading the way in this space and call on the federal government to make more that helps, not hinders, city innovation and progress around carbon reduction. I'm bringing this today with Commissioner Udaley, and I'd like to ask Commissioner Udaley to offer some opening remarks as well, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Climate change is an issue of economic and racial injustice as well as an environmental crisis. Low-income residents and communities of color are disproportionately impacted by climate change. Communities who are already vulnerable due to economic injustices bear the brunt of climate disasters and do not have the resources to combat them. In this presentation, we will hear how PBOT and BPS's efforts through the Climate Challenge will support our commitment to advancing racial equity and transportation justice objectives. The transportation sector contributes 42% of our local carbon emissions, and while we have made progress overall on reducing carbon emissions, we are going the wrong direction on transportation. As the commissioner in charge of PBOT, I am supportive of the bold transportation actions we'll hear about during this presentation. I think that's putting it a little bit lightly. I might be behind some of it. These actions are not only critical to combating climate change, they're steps we must take to create a more equitable transportation system. There's a reason this is called a climate challenge. It pushes Portland to go further and faster and continue to be a leader on this issue. I know we're up for the challenge. And now I'd like to hand it over to PBOT Director Chris Warner, who will kick off the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Udaley, and thank you, other members of council, for the opportunity to present today. As Commissioner said, I'm Chris Warner. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Transportation. And the work of our two bureaus, we're working together to really undertake this process of the American Cities Climate Challenge. As was mentioned, this is an unprecedented effort for our cities. In 2018, in the wake of the federal government's decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement, Bloomberg Philanthropies created the American Cities Climate Challenge to empower cities to lead the way. Cities are the biggest contributor to climate change, accounting for more than 70% of global emissions. But cities are also key to solving the challenge of climate change and mitigating its effects. Cities are effective hubs of innovation and experimentation, and city governments are also uniquely positioned to take accelerated, impactful actions on carbon reduction efforts. The Climate Challenge, supported with $70 million in funding from Bloomberg Philanthropies, provides access to capacity-building package of resources to augment and accelerate our near-term climate action efforts. And by participating in the challenge, we can go further, faster in our work to curb emissions. The 100 largest U.S. cities were invited to apply to the challenge. Portland was one of 25 cities selected to be part of this 2-year effort, which runs through the end of 2020. The other cities are shown on the screen.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Andrea Durbin, the Bureau Director for Planning and Sustainability. Thank you very much for having us here, Mayor and Commissioners. The Climate Challenge focuses on areas where cities can deliver the most impact, the transportation and building sectors. Most carbon emissions in the United States come from powering our homes, businesses, and in Portland, it's the same. Based on the latest figures, 42% of emissions in Multnomah County come from transportation, while building energy, broken into residential and commercial, accounts for 40% of the pie.
The Climate Challenge focuses on impact and on action, providing cities resources to accelerate and augment our climate action efforts. The 25 cities combined will have a goal of reducing 40 million metric tons of CO2 by 2025. That would be equivalent to taking 8.5 million cars off the road or closing 10 coal-fired power plants.
The Climate Challenge coincides with our Bureau's work to update Portland and Multnomah County's Climate Action Plan in 2020. The initiatives and strategies we advance with Climate Challenge support will form the foundation for the building, energy, and transportation chapters of that updated plan. The Climate Challenge efforts will also support the city's commitment to advancing racial equity and transportation justice, specifically by first providing resources that enable us to better partner with and build the capacity of community-based organizations to deliver innovative climate solutions in a climate justice-centered way, and second, supporting technical analysis and modeling so we know who our investments impact, what barriers and choices Portlanders face when making transportation decisions, and how our climate action work improves equitable outcomes across the city. But before we dive into what we'll be doing through the Climate Challenge program, let's take a look at how we're doing in terms of carbon emissions. Overall, we've made progress over the last decades, and we're reducing emissions faster than the country as a whole. That said, our emissions have fluctuated over the last 2 years, and we need to quicken the pace of action to cut carbon pollution to meet our goals. Our Climate Action Plan has ambitious goals. By 2030, we're committed to reducing our emissions by 40% compared to 1990 levels. And by 2050, our current goal is to reduce carbon emissions by 80%. But we plan to recommend that this be updated to reflect the city's commitment of 100% renewables and calls from scientists that say that we need to reduce emissions by 100% below 1990 levels by 2050. You can see here how far we have to go to close these gaps. Again, we need to accelerate and go bigger on our actions to reduce carbon.
This chart shows the trend across different sectors of Multnomah County between 2000 and 2017. As our population continues to grow and more people move through our region, our transportation emissions have actually increased, as you can see by the bars in the middle of this graph. In the last year alone, transportation emissions increased by 6.4%, and since 1990, they've increased by a total of 8%. To get back on the right track, we would have to reduce the amount we have to reduce the amount that we drive alone to deal with carbon emissions. And the vehicles that remain on the road need to be fueled by electricity or other low-carbon fuels. So what do we get for participating in the Climate Challenge? All 25 cities get access to a network of partners to help build capacity, share information and resources, and engage in peer learning on how to accelerate carbon reduction efforts. Some of these partners are shown on the slide. Portland also receives deep dive, tailored support to help with our specific goals. This would include technical planning and design consultation from Nelson Nygaard, the Rocky Mountain Institute, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, behavioral nudging strategy and campaign development support from Ideas 42 to enhance transportation demand management around PBOT capital projects, funding from the Energy Foundation to engage local community-based organizations in our conversations around pricing for equitable mobility and community renewables, and data governance from the Center for Government Excellence at Johns Hopkins University. A full-time climate advisor is also embedded at PBOT, funded by NRDC, to support program delivery, stakeholder engagement, and coordination with the broader Climate Challenge Network.
And now we'll talk specifically about the initiatives under the Climate Challenge. Our game plan encompasses several big moves and bright ideas that will move the needle on emissions in the building and transportation sectors. I will cover two of those. One, energy efficiency is the most cost-effective actions that we can take to reach our climate goals. We have an opportunity to significantly increase energy efficiency in buildings that the city owns and manages, save the city money, and use these cost savings to finance this program. With the help of the Climate Challenge, we're putting together an energy action plan for city buildings that will guide where we invest in energy efficiency at a much faster and deeper scale than we've attempted before. In 2017, the City Council established a goal to be 100% renewable, community and economy-wide by 2050. Last fall, Mayor, you signed C40's Net Zero Carbon Buildings Declaration, which commits us to own and operate net zero carbon municipal assets by 2030. Reducing energy use is a fundamental pillar of decarbonizing buildings and getting to 100% renewable. Without energy efficiency, we cannot meet our climate reduction goals. The city has been investing in energy efficiency since the 1990s through the Sustainable City Government Program, which directs bureaus to invest in any energy efficiency measures that have a 10-year payback or less. These efforts have saved us over $80 million since 1991. PBOT's LED street lighting project is a great example of this. However, investments in our building stock have lagged lately. We have a lot of energy efficiency savings potential and savings opportunities. Any energy efficiency delivers multiple benefits and positive outcomes for the city, aside from reducing carbon emissions. It saves us money, reduces maintenance costs, improves asset management, contributes to local jobs and opportunities for workforce development, and creates healthier buildings for people to work in. The Parks Bureau has created a great model of investing in energy efficiency for some of their buildings, which will save them millions in utility and maintenance costs over time. That work will inform our recommended plan. We expect to come back to City Council with the Energy Action Plan and subsequent funding proposals to move this work forward that relies on the cost savings to fund these investments. So more to come soon. The second area of focus for Bureau of Planning and Sustainability in this climate challenge is focused on community-based renewable energy, specifically community solar. Community solar is a collective effort to site, fund, and construct community-scale solar energy systems that benefit people who can't put solar on their own rooftops. We know that our renewable energy programs over the past have benefited mostly white homeowners. Community solar offers a chance to expand access and benefits to people of color and low-income Portlanders, including reduced energy costs and creating jobs in this sector. Our climate challenge goal is to support the development of at least one community solar project in Portland that benefits low-income and communities of color by the end of 2020. We're working with several partners, including Verde, the Energy Foundation, and Grid Alternatives for this pilot. The lessons from this project will also inform the work of the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which opens up the possibility of scaling community solar benefits across the city.
As you know, the council adopted the Central City in Motion implementation plan in 2018. During the climate challenge period, we will be implementing 4 Central City in Motion projects. One is the Southwest Madison dedicated bus lane, which opened last month. A second will be the Northwest Everett dedicated bus lane, which will be coming next month. And then the Burnside Bridge Phase 1, we're working with Multnomah County, will be a dedicated bus lane on coming this fall. And then Burnside Phase 2, which is a dedicated bus lane all the way to 12th Avenue on the east side, that'll be coming next fall.
All the way to 12, huh?
All the way to 12.
Burnside goes a long way.
This is Central City in Motion, Commissioner.
Okay. And the Climate Challenge resources will help us to improve and expand our communications around these projects, highlighting the climate action benefit and capitalizing on the improvements to encourage behavior among Portland commuters. We'll also work with Climate Challenge partners, specifically Nelson Nygaard, to learn from the Central City in Motion experience and inform the development of the Enhanced Transit Priority Network pilot, which you probably heard called the Red Lane or the Rose Lane project. On the bicycle side, we are advancing 3 Central City in Motion projects during the Climate Challenge window, Southwest Madison, Burnside Phases 1 and 2, as well as the advancing of the planning around the Better NATO permanent installation and adding dedicated bike lanes on Southwest 4th Avenue. Our transportation demand management team within PBOT Active Transportation and Safety implements a number of top-notch programs that encourages Portlanders to take transit, bike, or walk. This includes Smart Trips, the Transportation Wallet, and Sunday Parkways. Through the Climate Challenge, we will get focused, deep dive support from behavioral insights firm Ideas 42, who will help us develop new TDM tools and messages, test their effectiveness, and boost the impact of our existing and future TDM programs. We're also planning to pilot an HOV prioritization program that will incentivize multi-passenger trips in taxis and TNCs. Finally, the Climate Challenge resources will enable us to engage the local community partners in dialogue around pricing for equitable mobility, and you'll be hearing more from that in a little bit. But first, I would like to invite our partner from NRDC to say a few words on the Climate Challenge and how they are supporting our work. So there's Elizabeth right there. So
Here I am.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Can you hear me okay? Not at all? All right. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Stamp with NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm a city strategist with the American Cities Climate Challenge, and I work with Portland as well as 5 other western cities to help each city advance its climate goals. Portland, as you've heard, was chosen for its vision and its ambitious goals. We are enthusiastic in our support for what you're doing for these actions that you've heard about, and also particularly, I think, in Portland for your thoughtful commitment and approach to equity and transportation justice as part of that work. We are also excited that you, Mayor Wheeler, will be going to Washington, D.C. next week, along with mayors from 3 other Climate Challenge cities, to demonstrate Portland's leadership on climate on the national stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that, too.
So we are here to answer any questions you might have about this piece. We have a bunch of other folks from both of our bureaus here, if there's any specifics you want. And so we can have that dialogue, and then we'll talk about the value pricing.
There.
Commissioner Daly.
Director Durbin, could you elaborate a little bit on what a community solar project would look like? Maybe everyone in the room knows what it would look like, but perhaps viewers at home do not, because I think it's a little more exciting than what it sounds
And
like.
what I just said, yes.
No, no,
That's okay.
no. Than
Of
what the
course.
term sounds like.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. So the community solar program is a way for, if you don't have, your own home, it isn't well positioned for solar, you can benefit from solar being placed in another place where it is available for solar, and you can directly benefit from the reduced cost savings because you can participate in a broader program. There are opportunities to really scale solar in communities, broader communities, and thinking about ways to build resilience for communities as well, and being dependent on the shift away from fossil fuel dependency towards renewables. Community solar, I think, can really play an important role in providing that resilience and independence for communities to rely on solar power.
So the actual equipment would be sited on one or more buildings, but it could serve dozens of households?
It can serve many multiple households depending on the size
Yeah.
of, yes, and community, and kind of a neighborhood kind of focus as well.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. The chart that you showed us, Andrea, and on Multnomah County carbon emissions, I was struck by the fact that wastewater treatment is listed, but it's listed at 0. So why is it listed? And assuming that it's slightly more than 0, what are we talking about?
That is a good question. I don't know if my staff in the room have an answer to that question or not. I I think it's probably listed as zero, so it probably doesn't rank enough to categorize it here, but
Well, I mean, I have the BES in my portfolio.
Yes, you do.
I was just curious, since it called out wastewater treatment, but was it zero? And we're thinking about ways of reducing our carbon footprint, and we're already at zero.
So you're good.
Okay, quit bragging,
doing well.
Commissioner Fish.
You're 0.8 maybe.
I don't need an answer today, but I'd be interested in just
Yeah.
knowing, why is it called out? Why are we at zero? And what, assuming that it's rounded down to zero, what is the remaining challenge
Yeah.
that you've identified?
we'll follow up with you, Commissioner Fish. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just had a couple of quick questions right off the bat. On your page where you list your community partners, you have listed Fourth Empowering Mobility, which is the electric auto company, and SEI as partners in this effort. What do those two bring to this effort? Those two organizations bring to this effort?
Yeah, I can certainly talk about Fourth. I think SEI is not the SEI that
I
we're
can
thinking
talk
of.
about SEI. I mean,
Oh, is that
actually-
another SEI? Is
Yeah, I
that not
believe
a?
it
Yeah, see what happens when you use acronyms? Told you guys, right? All right, yes, I'd love to know what SEI stands for.
Uh-oh, I'm not sure I can tell you what SEI stands for, but I can, thank you. Stockholm Energy Institute. Thank you, Emma.
Ah, thank you.
What, I can tell you their role, which is they're doing the modeling that's calculating the emissions reductions from the different actions.
Thank you. I think that's an important, the acronyms make me crazy around here because that's like, we do that a lot. But it's a good reminder that, because immediately I had Self-Enhancement Inc. in mind when I read SEI, so that was my assumption, so thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe the Fourth, when we're dealing with electrification of the transportation system, I think they're a great partner with us in terms of bringing their expertise and their values and their abilities to the table.
I used to participate in their meetings before I ended up here, and I agree. I think that they could be a good partner, but the state passed a law to make it easier for low-income people to buy electric cars, and we spent no money. And they met for at least a year and a half trying to figure out how they could partner with community-based organizations. So we have resources available that we haven't tapped into. How are we gonna make them spend that money in low-income communities?
Yeah. I don't know. I saw the article in the paper this morning, and hopefully they are making progress in terms, I think there was some hesitation in terms of the lawsuit by the auto dealers in terms of whether or not they would implement it, but it seems to me that they do have a contractor on board that can start with that program. But I think you're right that there is, we'd love to get that program moving quicker, more quickly.
Me too, especially out in East Portland where, we need help.
Okay.
Mayor,
Commissioner
Chris,
Fish.
since you're here, on the Bloomberg app on my phone today, I saw an announcement by Uber, and presumably Lyft is going to follow, saying that within the next 5 years, they want to have a fleet that is completely automated and without any operator in their cars. I'm assuming that we're not, as a city, party to any such discussions with TNCs currently, and at some point in the future, if that does become the new business model, that would come to council for robust discussion about whether that's something we want to see here?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've talked about doing some possible testing, but not with Uber or Lyft. I think there are some other companies that might be interested in testing, but yeah, no, I think that's a long ways off in terms of, and we are very, very anxious to make sure that we're not, number one, preempted by the state, but two, that our values are reflected in any kind of work that any TNCs would do in the city. So we would be very, very hesitant to endorse any kind of effort like
And that would include a pilot, right? Any conversation about a pilot would first come to council for discussion?
It could. We haven't gotten that far.
It could or would?
Would you like it to?
I would like to put a marker down that
Okay.
even a pilot would come to council for discussion.
Great.
Because I know we have to put the infrastructure in with these TNCs. And I just think we're opening up a Pandora's box that we need to have a conversation about.
I guess I want to clarify, a pilot with TNCs would definitely something, but just if any other pilot just on automated vehicles, would you like that to come to council?
I think so.
Okay.
Anything that doesn't involve a driver
Okay,
in a vehicle
Right.
in my neighborhood.
okay. All right,
I'd like to have a chance to learn more about it and why we're confident that we can meet certain safety standards. And given the behavior of the TNCs in the last legislative session, where they worked overtime to try to preempt the city of Portland from doing even modest regulations of that industry, that was not a confidence-building measure for me.
yeah. I think we've taken notes. Yeah, we've taken notes on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a confidence-building measure for me either, but they failed, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
They are resilient.
they'll come back.
they will be
They will be back.
So am I.
Mayor,
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I do have one more question. You mentioned something about the solar project. And I just wanted to, for the public record, remind people that the Portland Clean Energy Fund initiative really will be driven by the community proposals and not by what government thinks would be a really cool thing to do, right? So I don't want to leave the perception that somehow we're going to take this fund and we're going to put solar all over the city of Portland, because that's not, in fact, what this fund is about. So I just wanted to correct that for the public record. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
Super. So I would love to have to talk about the pricing for equitable mobility. I'd like Noah Siegel and Shoshana Cohen from PBOT to come up, and we can have a conversation on that. Thank you, Council.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Shoshana Cohen. Sorry, a little close. I'm the Mobility and Government Affairs Manager in PBOT's Office of the Director, and I appreciate your time today. As Director Warner just said, we're going to switch gears and begin to talk about pricing for equitable mobility. So as we begin, first, why are we here? Why are we bringing a resolution on pricing for equitable mobility as part of this discussion today? This is really the next stage of work that began back in November 2017. At that time, City Council asked PBOT and BPS to begin to consider congestion pricing, also sometimes known as pricing for mobility or even value pricing. We're not sure the exact name yet. Specifically, we were asked at that time to work with ODOT on their pricing project on I-5 and I-205 and advocate for a pricing project that supports demand management and a project that is designed to help improve equity, climate, and safety outcomes. This request to work with ODOT was driven by the fact that the city's Central City 2035 plan pairs the Rose Quarter Improvement Project with pricing along I-5. And these things were paired in the plan to ensure that any design improvements were coupled with policies to use space as efficiently as possible by managing demand and prevent future costly major expansions. The second part of the 2017 resolution was to begin to more broadly consider how congestion pricing can be used as a congestion management tool to help us deliver on our wider transportation system goals. And we were asked at that time to report back to council, and so here we are. So before we go into details about what we've been doing and what we've learned, we do want to revisit briefly sort of why are we even considering congestion pricing. Put simply, people don't like congestion. The chart here is from a 2019 ODOT survey on transportation needs and attitudes. And when asked how serious is traffic congestion in your area, 76% of Portland survey respondents said that it was either very serious or somewhat serious. Portlanders think congestion is a problem. Not only is congestion a problem right now, but it's a growing problem. The region is expected to grow by 500,000 people by 2040. And as the population grows, so will our congestion problem. Put sort of simply, more people and more cars equals more misery for those stuck in congestion or those experiencing the negative impacts of congestion. And congestion does bring with it very significant problems. It amounts to a hidden tax, or really you could think of it as multiple taxes. There are economic costs to businesses and families for fuel, vehicle maintenance, and lost time. It brings health problems that are caused by long commutes and poor air quality. And of course, there are climate impacts. As you just heard already, about 42% of carbon emissions in Multnomah County come from the transportation sector, and transportation is trending in the wrong direction. Greenhouse gas emissions have increased 8% since 1990. And all of the discussion about our various climate initiatives today is because there's urgency to this work. In Oregon, we're already experiencing the effects of the climate crisis in the form of more extreme weather and forest fires. The status quo and the impacts of congestion are also inequitable. The median family income of Portland area car commuters is about 73%, while that of bike and walk commuters is about 42,000. Sorry, I said 73%, 73,000, while that of bike and walk commuters is about 42,000, and transit riders is 44,700. And communities of color are more transit dependent in Portland. Non-white Portlanders make up only 22% of drive-alone commuters, but 36% of transit commuters. And we know that lower-income Portlanders have been displaced to, some low-income Portlanders have been displaced to the edges of the city, giving them longer commutes. Yet, as of 2015, almost 31% of Black households in Portland did not have access to a vehicle, versus just under 14% of white households. And average commute times for Black commuters are 20% longer than white commuters.
Excuse me, is that national data or is that local?
Portland, I think it's based on 2015 from PolicyLink, National Equity Atlas, but it's City of Portland specific.
Thank you.
And as the picture on your screens here demonstrates, currently buses are by and large riding in the same lanes as car traffic. We mentioned the Rose Lane projects and other projects we are intending to do to move them out of traffic, but still in many cases, buses are getting stuck in traffic behind the single occupancy vehicles and having the people on the buses are having the problems of congestion and not causing them. Lastly, for those that do drive, it's expensive. Most transportation funding sources, like the fuels tax and the vehicle registration fee, are regressive. Transportation is often the second highest household expense, and as transportation costs rise, lower income people have to spend proportionally more of their income on transportation. Transportation is also in the midst of big changes and disruption, and possibly more. We have the private hire industry, TNCs, Uber and Lyft, have recently entered our city. They're talking about things like autonomous vehicles. And the maps that you're looking at here are maps of private for hire rides in rush hours. These include Lyft, Uber, and also the taxi industry rides. And on the left, this shows the origins of rides that terminate in the central city. And the yellow areas are the places with the most rides. So what we're seeing here are that there are many short rides during peak hours, which are happening in close-in areas with a variety of transportation options. And then the right shows a similar pattern is true for rides that are leaving the central city during rush hour. Many are going just short distances in transportation-rich areas. So it's clear that congestion causes many problems, but why do we think we need to consider pricing as one of the solutions? The answer is really because everything else we're doing is simply not enough. As a city, we have many ambitious planned projects and strategies to relieve congestion and help people get where they need to go, both people and goods. We're constantly working to provide better facilities and options for people to take transit, to walk, to bike. And we're not alone in this work. The Regional Transportation Plan lays out almost $15 billion worth of planned transportation system investments by 2040. Yet modeling shows that even with all of these investments, vehicle hours of delay are still expected to go up by 120% by 2027. In other words, the status quo is not really an option, and we need to consider new tools like pricing if we want to more effectively relieve congestion and increase mobility for all of us. So back to 2017 and what we've been doing since you first asked us to consider pricing. First, the City of Portland did participate in the ODOT Portland Metro Area Value Pricing Advisory Committee. We advocated during that process for City of Portland values within the process, and we're pleased that the first phase of the project finished with an application to the Federal Highway Administration that reflected a commitment to continue analysis of equity impacts and solutions, transit needs, and diversion. We've also engaged in peer city learning, both directly with other cities and with a variety of national and international associations. We've learned from international cities like London and Stockholm who have implemented congestion pricing. And we've also learned from a variety of North American cities who, like us, are grappling with congestion and the negative impacts and thinking about how congestion pricing may be a solution to improve mobility, climate, and equity outcomes. And we have really focused in on questions of pricing and equity. We know that pricing can work from a demand management perspective. The question is, can it also be a tool to deliver more equitable transportation outcomes? And Noah is going to continue to share more detail about what we've learned.
Thank you, Shoshana. I'm Noah Siegel, the Interim Deputy Director of PBOT. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. So during this time of our study and partnerships with other cities and organizations such as the American Cities Climate Challenge, what have we learned? So on this graph on slide 12, this is actually a pullout from the recent Seattle congestion pricing report. We're working very closely and sort of in tandem with them. You see, number one, that pricing really works. That congestion pricing in the cities listed here, such as Stockholm, London, Singapore, and others, have delivered a significant reduction in single occupancy vehicle trips, motor vehicle trips in general, a significant reduction in greenhouse gases, time saved for people to be with their families, to get more work done, and quite a bit of revenue as well is generated through this. So just on a technical level, pricing really works.
Noah, can I ask you a
Yeah.
question? Earlier in our PowerPoint, it says we're poised to invest almost $15 billion in our transportation system by 2040. And so that's a big number, and I know there's some variables in that. But actually, what struck me is that the net annual revenue is pretty modest compared to the needs of our system. But rather than look at it just in terms of the number, I'd be interested to know, in any of these peer cities, what did they do with that net revenue?
Yeah, I'm going to
They
touch on that in a little
They invested
bit.
in something related
Yeah.
to the problem.
That's right.
And I'd just be curious what kinds of investments they made.
Yeah, I'd love to share that with you. I think first of all, just on the first point that you made, that is that number, the 40 billion is from the regional, the 15 billion, sorry, is from the regional transportation plan. So that covers the entire region, including ODOT investments, TriMet investments within, I believe, the financially constrained forecast for the region. So that's that's well beyond the city of Portland, and it covers all kinds of modes. So the amounts that are generated here look largely at central city area-based pricing, cordons around downtowns, and heavily congested areas. So just to sort of put that in context, these are annual numbers too, by the way. And on the question of what have other cities done with their revenue, just trying to think, it's 2 slides ahead. Can you hang in there with me?
I didn't mean to preempt you.
The second thing we learned, I just wanted to, this is sort of an important figure, which is that it's small changes really matter. So when our recession hit in 2008, and unfortunately, fewer people were driving to work, the number of vehicles, trips on the road declined 3%, but the measures of congestion as a result dropped 30%. And it sounds counterintuitive, but if you've been on the roads during spring break for school and a certain number of drivers are pulled off the road, the effects are exponential. So it's not about pulling everybody off the road. It's really the small changes in behavior, the trips avoided, make a huge difference. It's an important fact. The other lesson that we learned, getting to your point, Commissioner Fish, is that the link to transit is really critical. And where this has happened, there's been dramatic investment in transit across the board. And that connection is really vital because to be successful, you can't just frame it in terms of the punitive effects of, you can't drive, you have to pay more. It's really about freeing people from sitting in traffic in their cars and giving other options. So for instance, in London, about 90% of the revenue went to transit expansion and service. In Oslo, they recently shifted to 100% of revenue going to support transit. In LA, the head of the Metro LA has talked about congestion pricing, making transit free in LA. These are some of the proposals and ideas and uses of the revenue that have come in. We do have an obstacle in this respect, in that the Oregon Constitution prohibits the use of revenues generated from the road on non-roadway improvements, such as transit operations. That's an obstacle that we know about and need to wrestle with. There may be solutions to that going forward, but it's there. In addition, by the way, there's also the question, what you do with the revenue also can be a question of exemptions and assistance to low income. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So once you've generated that value, there's a question of what do you do with it and what's important to you. Some cities have exempted, for instance, electric vehicles from the pricing scheme because they prioritize clean vehicles. Others have put it towards low income support. So there's a question of you generate the value and then where do you put it? We also have learned that every place is unique. And the political economy, the goals of each place really matter. And understanding what drives a place to make what is a very difficult solution is really critical to moving forward. And that's how we're arriving at our framing here today. So the picture you see here is the alliance that was put together in New York between safety advocates, union workers, environmentalists, really about saving the MTA, the subway system in New York. That's been driving the congestion pricing plans there. Madrid was focused on cutting air pollution, and Seattle has really been focused on its climate goals as the motivating factor. So it's different in each place. And we really want to acknowledge the specific challenges in Portland in looking at this. So we want to be ambitious, but also thoughtful about how we do this. So unlike in other cities, many of our commuters into downtown are not wealthy. For instance, San Francisco and New York have about 2 to 3% of low-income people going into downtown ever by car. It makes sense. The parking is exorbitant. Why would you do it? Here, it's much higher, closer to 10%, and then an additional good chunk of over 40% would be median income. So it's not as clear-cut here. Who's going into downtown? Also, as mentioned before, gentrification and displacement place additional burdens on low-income people, people of color coming into the city. And I just think it's important to be honest, too, that for many, many people, cars represent the solution to their immediate crises. And we heard this directly from community groups we met with, that the climate crisis is real, it's important, but the daily crisis of getting to work, getting to childcare, solving those problems is what people are dealing with. And for many of those people, cars are the solution right now. So that's our starting place, and we need to be honest about that. We also want to acknowledge that it's politically hard. This guy, Boris Johnson, who's probably going to become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom this week, started his career in running for mayor of London in opposition to congestion pricing. There was a major backlash against it. So it's politically difficult. And at the same time, I would point out that he never removed the congestion pricing once he came into office. It worked well, and he didn't change it. In addition, Stockholm, before they adopted, had only 30% support for the project. After it was adopted, they had 70% support for it. And according to that same DHM poll, we start off in a better place. Portlanders are about 50-50 in support of congestion pricing out of the gate. So, it's a difficult subject, but not impossible.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. Is that across the board? Is that based on community? You said Portlanders are about 50-50 in support of congestion
No,
pricing?
you mean like broken down into demographics?
I mean, demographically, low-income people think this is a really cool thing, people of color think it's a cool thing, or is that just a generic 50%?
That's generic. I don't have the crosstabs, but that's the kind of thing we really need to dig into as well.
Right. Because I would suggest that different communities would have a different answer to that question.
Yeah, that may be. I mean, I think that, again, focusing on, it's not easy. That's definitely part of the struggle with this, and keeping that in mind, that's absolutely right. Commissioner?
I was just going to say, they may have different opinions, but congestion and climate change has a pretty similar effect on all of us. So I think it's incumbent upon us to convey to the public that we have really limited options to solving for these problems. And one of the things that I'm excited about with this challenge is that we're going to get a chance to show the public that, like the Rose Lane project, for instance, is one piece of an overall strategy. We can't just give priority bus lanes. We have to improve our overall system. We have to solve for
Right.
racial equity, accessibility, et cetera. I mentioned in our meeting yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I'm not sure what day it is anymore, that with very few exceptions, I agree with all the criticisms and fears I'm hearing about the Rose Lane project. I also have an answer for almost all of them, but they are legitimate concerns given the current conditions on the ground. So, Noah, where are you in your presentation? Because I'll probably save the rest of my comments for,
We're about 2/3 of the way through,
Okay.
so.
If I may, Mayor.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you for that statement, Commissioner Daly. And my comments are really about doing it right as compared to just doing it, because we have too many examples of saying that we're going to protect low-income people and communities that have been marginalized and pushed to the edges of our city. And at the end of the day, that is not a reality. And so I'm looking forward to working with your office and with the Department of Transportation and others to make sure that if we roll out a congestion pricing program, that we have the best one possible that absolutely protects low-income people and those who've been pushed to the edges of our city. I think it would be criminal to charge people for the privilege of coming back to a city they've been pushed out of, and I would not support something that did that later. It has to be done at the front end and not the back end.
well, Commissioner, I certainly agree with you, and I want to note that this initiative is not called congestion pricing, it's called pricing for equitable mobility, and racial justice is at the heart of our efforts here.
I know, but we say that so often.
Okay, well, I'm saying it.
I hear you,
Yeah.
but I'm telling you, at the end of the day, it has to be at the beginning and not at the back end.
That's exactly
You
what.
know what, before I
this
just
is.
lose one thought, I want to, and with my luck, it's going to be 2 slides forward, so let me just flag it. I mean, one way of looking at this is that we charge people a little more to change their behavior so they don't contribute to congestion. Another way of looking at this problem is working with our employers to create flexible work schedules so that people are not required to go to work during peak times. The city could be, for example, could be the leader in saying, you don't have to get in line, in the queue with your car during the peak congestion periods. We'll give you some flexibility. Are we coupling our work on congestion pricing with thinking about ways of being a leader as a governmental entity and working with our private employers to create some more flexibility in scheduling?
Yeah, I think, thanks.
The next slide.
Thank you for the lead-in. Just following on what you were saying, Commissioner Hardesty, I actually, when we took this charge in 2017 and we went back, I think the traditional path that we've seen a lot of other cities take is to write up sort of glossy technical reports and to pull in consultants and start with why this is good for everyone. And they're not wrong. I mean, on a pure policy basis, this really is the only solution long-term to congestion. And you can come to that solution, that decision tomorrow or in 15 years, but it will remain true. But how you get there is probably more important than what the solution is. And we've seen many, many more cities try and fail to implement this than those that have succeeded. So we went back and asked ourselves, what would success look like in a Portland context? And what we did, Commissioner Fish, was we actually took a giant step back. And this was right when I had the pleasure of joining PBOT about a year ago. And we said, we actually need to rethink our entire strategic plan. So to just run out in front and say it's time to price everyone, that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about a holistic approach to how we grow as a city together and how we do that fairly. So we have launched, actually today, it's going live digitally, our new PBOT strategic plan. So we look at safety, which you've heard about in other presentations, our asset management, and then moving people and goods, which we look at as a suite of solutions that include building new things. Southwest Corridor Light Rail, for instance, is something that's come before you. So Division Transit, these are things that we're building out. That's an important part of the solution. Reallocating right-of-way, such as the Rose Lane project. And then, how we do price signals, both positive and negative. So that includes working with employers, Commissioner Fish. We're having a big program effort to reach out this year to start working with employers. So yes, it's the positive and the negative price signals and incentives that we want to work on together. And I will say that our starting place is actually entirely regressive. We still have a federal tax subsidy for corporate parking spaces in downtown Portland. So we are encouraging people to drive alone to businesses. That's our starting place. So how we start to work with employers to move away from that and think about who needs these trips the most, and how do we work to use our limited road space the most effectively that we can.
And I just want to note, the driving questions between every solution in that strategic plan are, how will this advance racial equity, and how will this impact climate change?
Right. Thanks. Jump to the next slide then, yeah. That's right, we ran our entire, including this pricing effort, through those two questions. And so, again, Commissioner Hardesty, we came to the decision here that what we're doing is not trying to to implement congestion pricing. We're trying to get the right price signals in place to make our transportation system more equitable. So what are we talking about? There are a number of different kinds of congestion pricing, which we'll touch on. You see pictures here that represent it. There's traditional
wrapper.
freeway tolling. There's our parking kitty, cat wrapper. You can do congestion pricing. San Francisco is looking at doing this through dynamic parking. The airport does a form of congestion pricing with Uber and Lyft currently.
So LA has a lot of toll roads. Is that technically congestion pricing?
It's on the continuum. I mean, I think that the toll roads are often implemented to gather revenue to build more roads. And so once you have the tolling, yes, you can manage demand on those roads, but yes.
Well, I was in LA recently, and I noticed that there was a box on my rent-a-car. And I would have been charged had I moved 4 lanes out
Right.
to get on the high-speed lanes that were largely empty, actually, as I was stuck in traffic. But is that a kind of congestion pricing?
That's the kind of congestion pricing that's most familiar to Americans, which is what have sometimes been called Lexus lanes. So you get the privilege of going faster if you pay. So to build out another road or reallocate an HOV lane. That's a form of congestion pricing. We have not looked at that in Portland because we don't have the extra freeway space that some of those cities do to reallocate. And actually, it's not really what we're after. At the end of the day, we're after managing the entire system, and that's how ODOT and their advisory committee arrived at those 2 pilot projects. But yes, that is is a limited supply of expedited road space at express lane, and you price it. And then there are cordons around cities, sort of circles around cities for entry with an entry fee, and finally, sort of more futuristic ideas about pricing per mile or road user charges, which may be particularly applicable as we enter into the age of autonomous vehicles. So in terms of what we're doing, I'll hand it back to Shoshana.
So moving forward, we are sort of grouping all of those different types into 3 buckets of pricing policies. And again, with each of these types, the question is how could they be implemented in a way that actually increases equitable mobility? The 3 groupings that you see here are based on who is in the position to deliver or implement these policies. So the first type are options for high congested areas within the City of Portland and under City of Portland control. The next grouping is the ongoing work that ODOT is leading to consider how pricing can be used on I-5 and I-205. And finally, there are sort of larger interjurisdictional potential pricing policies, and Metro is leading this work to begin technical analysis and consider larger system-wide pricing.
Just one question. Under any one of these types, 1, 2, or 3, is there a permission that we need to have from the federal government?
Well, it varies. And so for things, and we're going to talk a little bit more in the next slides, for City of Portland only things, we're really talking about things like variable parking, demand-based parking.
We have control over that.
The freeway pricing, there is a permission needed from the federal government. ODOT has already submitted a application to the Federal Highway Administration and received sort of tentative permission or permission to move forward. The state of Oregon has a position in what's called the value pricing pilot program. So we do need to work with the federal government on the federal facilities, but then there are things that are within our control as well.
I have, just a point of interest, we have asked Mayor Wheeler to deliver in his trip to Washington the message that if the federal government is neither going to pay for our infrastructure nor address our climate crisis, they should at least remove the prohibitions on us from managing the freeway system that runs through our city.
The
I'm
last
sure
time
it'll go
some,
over very well.
Thank you.
the last time someone was that undiplomatic, they lost their job in London. So I just want you to know that why don't we send Noah to deliver that message, Ted?
No, I intend to deliver it myself. They're eagerly waiting it.
So again, within City of Portland control, we really want to look at how we are allocating the space within our right-of-way and consider how we're valuing the space and getting the most efficient use out of it. So again, we could consider more demand-based variable parking pricing, or consider more private for hire fleet management pricing policies, or how we prioritize and price high occupancy vehicles on City of Portland streets.
I have a question about the like Uber and Lyft kind of services. We could also regulate them to ensure that they're not clogging up our roads during key hours, right? And are we looking at that as part of this whole, what makes sense, right? Because I don't know that if we've got people driving 2 miles or 3 miles somewhere, that's like really helpful, right? As we're looking at the amount of cars that are currently on the road. So we, as part of this process, those are also things we could look at? Excellent.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Okay. Yes, we will consider all of those sort of City of Portland things under our control.
And I just want to put a time check out. It's
Yeah.
3 o'clock, and I'm just
Okay.
looking
Yes,
at
we-
where
yes,
we are on
we-
the agenda.
So quickly, the second body is to continue engaging with ODOT on their project and continue advocating for City of Portland priorities, including making sure that it doesn't harm historically underserved communities, cause diversion, and we're thinking carefully about the associated transit needs. And then this resolution before you today also directs us to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Metro. Again, they are going to be undertaking a project to do the technical analysis, to understand the feasibility and effects of different congestion pricing tools in the region. These are mostly larger tools, a potential cordon, more robust freeway pricing, or a future sort of road user charge where pricing would be based on the vehicle miles that you travel. These are long-term strategies that are going to take a lot of thought and work, but we're excited to be partnering with Metro to get them started. New York is moving forward after at least 10 years of considering pricing, so we need to get going. And so we've been saying we want to think about how we can actually price to increase equitable mobility. What does that really mean? Based on what we've learned over the last year, we think that the answer is in a couple things. One is how you spend the revenue, and how you really very carefully design a particular pricing system. Revenue, again, as Noah mentioned, is most often linked to transit service improvements or potentially fare discounts. It could also be used for better infrastructure for walking, biking, and transit, especially with a focus on historically underserved areas. In designing the system for equity, the first thing we want to do is make sure to involve our equity stakeholders in design choices. We would want to consider particular geographies and rates carefully, provide discounts and exemptions on the fee for some drivers, potentially cash payment options, and prioritize emission reductions and other benefits for lower income communities. And basically for any particular project, we need to ask who's benefiting and who's being burdened, and also who's benefiting and being burdened by the status quo. So we know that we have a lot of work. We're just beginning and want to consider these topics, but we have a lot of work to do to get it right. So what we're really, the resolution before you today is asking to convene a Pricing for Equitable Mobility Task Force to engage in this work with us. We want to bring together a range of stakeholders to continue to study pricing options with us, and we want to really center equity voices in this task force. We are excited to be partnering with the Climate Challenge and their resources to partner with Opal, as well as some other sort of known transportation justice leaders in the community, and setting up this task force to report report directly to the directors of PBOT and BPS, and just bring the task force along with us in thinking about all of the three types of pricing that we just described, and really helping advise in the work moving forward in a way that works specifically within the Portland context. The timing of the work that we're talking about is we're hoping to convene this task force this fall, get started as soon as possible, and looking to them to provide a first near-term set of recommendations by next summer, and then with a final set of recommendations to City Council in spring 2020. So that's the end. We have some invited testimony, and we're also happy to take questions.
Very good. Any questions before we bring up the invited testimony? Great presentation. Appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much.
So I'm going to call people up for invited testimony. Please come up when your name is called and state your name for the record, because we are in a bit of a time crunch. Try to keep it real neat, tidy, and concise. So I want to invite Carrie Ayers-Palanek from TriMet, A.D. Leverett from Business for a Better Portland, and Jillian Detweiler from the Street Trust as our first invited guests.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Please begin.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. I'm Carrie Ayers-Palanek, the Director of Planning and Policy from TriMet. I'm happy to be here today in support of the city's efforts to enhance transit in the central city and support the Rose Lanes project and the study of pricing for equitable mobility. TriMet is excited to support the advanced thinking underway as part of the climate challenge, especially as it relates to enhanced public transit. For the Rose Lane project, we appreciate the focus on near-term projects to have in place by the end of 2020, including over 1.5 miles of bus-only lanes in the central city and kicking off the Rose Lanes project. In addition, we are also excited that the TriMet board has committed to move forward on a non-diesel bus fleet by 2040. By the end of this year, TriMet will have 5 battery electric buses on site and another 5 on order. For the pricing of equitable mobility, we are eager to be at the table to begin the community conversations. It is crucial that we continue to work together to move our bus and streetcar passengers through or around traffic congestion, to reduce transit delay, improve transit reliability, and improve and expand access for our transit riders to move around their communities. Reallocation of roadway space where one or more than one frequent service bus line travels is crucial to increase transit ridership and to meet our transit mode share goals within the city of Portland and in the greater metro region. These opportunities in front of us are crucial to highlight how high ridership transit is the most efficient, equitable, and sustainable way to move people. We also need to amplify our messaging and awareness to make sure riders see these changes on the ground to help them reach their destinations in a timely manner. TriMet is excited and ready to work with the City of Portland on these efforts as we tackle ways that the transportation sector can reduce levels of emissions and improve our community together through the Climate Challenge and Rose Lanes projects. Many of our frequent service lines are great candidate locations for Rose Lanes in order to further build upon the investments in service that we have in place through the frequent transit network. Thank you, and we look forward to continuing our work together.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Jillian Detweiler, Executive Director of the Street Trust. We're advocates for safe and convenient walking, biking, and public transportation. Everyone, regardless of race or income, should have safe, easy, and affordable transportation options. We were at the legislature calling for congestion pricing. We believe congestion pricing on the freeways needs to happen before freeways are expanded. And we were here in November 2017 when most of the council members sitting here today, except for Commissioner Hardesty, expressed an intention to study pricing as a way to manage transportation demand. We're here in support of today's resolution to create a task force and contract with Metro to study pricing options to manage demand on our transportation system. In the face of a climate crisis as well as the immediate term impacts of growth and displacement, we need to consider all the tools and strategies available to make our transportation system work better for people and the environment. Taking a deliberate look at pricing strategies to manage demand is an important piece of work. We especially appreciate the city's intent to think broadly about forms of pricing that might be considered beyond tolling. The task force will need to understand who pays now and how low-income households are impacted by our existing pricing schemes. A 2015 study found the subsidy of car users costs the typical American household $1,100 per year, over and above what they're paying for gas taxes, tolls, and other user fees. The task force should also attempt to understand how transportation investments funded by user fees can benefit low-income households by lowering transportation costs and reducing the amount of time trapped in traffic. Finally, the task force should compare pricing schemes to regulatory approaches. Pricing should not be a tool that allows people with money to continue business as usual, while those of lesser means make the changes we need to make to address climate change and congestion. Options need to reduce unfair burden that low-income and communities of color have historically faced in transportation funding decisions. The city needs to provide the resources needed for organizations representing low-income people and people of color to have capacity to fully participate in the task force and engage their stakeholders in the process. It's taken 20 months to get to today's recommendation of forming a task force, and so we urge the council and the commissioner in charge to commit to ensuring that benchmarks are met leading up to a final report in the spring of 2021. This can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon.
My name is Adie Leverett. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm here on behalf of Business for a Better Portland to complain to you guys about traffic. It's pretty bad, and it's only getting worse. I remember when it used to take only 15 minutes in a car to get pretty much anywhere in town. And now commutes are long and unreliable, freight moves through the region at a snail's pace, and you never know when your day is going to be brought to a grinding halt on the road. But while traffic might be everybody's favorite problem to complain about, with so many cultural and financial incentives that encourage us to drive, the solutions aren't immediately clear. But this idea of congestion pricing has gotten a lot of attention across the country lately. Of course, if you mention tolling as a solution to traffic, the reaction isn't typically enthusiastic. Nobody gets excited about paying for something that used to be free. But it's really time to take into account the severe toll that worsening traffic is already exacting on our city and our businesses. I'm not just talking about inconvenience. I'm talking about the huge societal costs associated with our clogged roads. These costs include the negative economic impacts of lost time, the negative health impacts of sedentary lifestyles and air pollution, and the negative climate impacts of greenhouse gas emissions. Even worse, these burdens are not distributed equitably throughout society. Low-income and communities of color suffer to a disproportionate degree because they typically can't afford to live close to where they work and are therefore forced to travel greater distances. Negative impacts in any one of these categories should be of grave concern to this council, and the fact that there's a single issue that's causing such widespread problems means that bold action is required. Implementing some form of value or congestion pricing in Portland as part of a comprehensive strategy that includes infrastructure improvements and significant investment in transit service is the kind of bold action that could really make a difference. Value pricing can take many forms and has the potential to create unintended consequences, however, so it's paramount that we study the options carefully and find meaningful ways to compensate for regressive impacts. For congestion pricing to be successful and equitable, people need to have reliable, affordable alternatives to driving. What is clear is that we cannot afford not to act. Other metropolitan areas provide cautionary tales for what can happen when growth outpaces transportation innovation. But we don't need to make those same mistakes. We know from other cities around the world that growth and mobility don't have to be at odds with each other when the system is designed to prioritize active transportation and public transit. Business for a Better Portland believes that business thrives when Portland thrives. Neither business nor Portland can thrive in gridlock. We must carefully consider every tool at our disposal to reduce congestion in our region, with particular attention toward reducing single occupancy vehicle use, improving the quality and reliability of public transit, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and ensuring that we're creating economic opportunities rather than economic burdens for low-income Portlanders and people of color.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Thanks, all three of you.
All right, next up, we have Maria Hernandez from Opal Environmental Justice Oregon, John Isaacs from Portland Business Alliance, Sarah Wright from the Oregon Environmental Council, and I'm going to go ahead and call up Phil Wu, retired pediatrician from Kaiser Permanente and vice chair of the Oregon Environmental Council Board, and just invite you to pull up a fourth chair from the gallery. Thank you. Welcome, and please make sure and state your name for the record.
Thank you, and good afternoon. For the record, my name is Maria Hernandez Segoviano, Advocacy and Policy Manager at Opal Environmental Justice, Oregon. Environmental justice acknowledges that the quality of our environmental impacts affects our lives, and the negative environmental impacts shall not disproportionately burden low-income or other impacted communities. While understanding that even a well-designed value congestion pricing, or any pricing for that matter, can be less burdensome to low-income communities if planned accordingly, and if those same communities can be brought in mind, we need to be carefully considering what does that look like and how does that process move forward. Therefore, we are here in support of Resolution 6787-79, Pricing for Equitable Mobility, because we know key questions must be asked first to those first and worst impacted by the same issues such as transportation, or for a better framing, lack of access of transportation mobility. In initiating conversations around a co-created congestion, or in general pricing mechanisms, needs to be co-created with community. We also understand that, as an example, congestion pricing can indeed be a good funding source for aging transportation infrastructure and public transit alternatives, and of course to reduce congestion, and more importantly, bring other outcomes such as climate benefits to our communities at the same time. However, we must ask the question about who benefits the most and to whom and where the burdens are needed in order to provide a robust equity analysis to view the potential unintended consequences, as already mentioned by a couple of other testimonies and some of you commissioners as well. It is important to note that as we continue with this conversation, we must also understand what are the current barriers in place for our communities before a new system comes in place. We know that a lot of our income communities, individuals, may not be able to afford tolling if we're looking at congestion tolling as a whole. Some high-income users are more likely to remain on the highway, pay the congestion fee, and benefit from a faster trip. In other terms, also, our low-income users may be worse off if they choose other less expensive times, routes, or other modes of transportation. Some even have ultimately barriers to transporter ownership. Others don't have a credit card. Others don't even have the technology to access what a good congestion pricing and tolling system could look like. Those are just a couple of the many barriers that our community is faced with when talking about what is it that they need and what is the most current benefit that can come out of this conversation. Therefore, we really appreciate the fact that this is not just talking about congestion pricing, and that really asking the core key question about what are the other access points to be able to access transportation as a whole, because we believe transportation is a human right. We believe individuals have the right to be able to go to their job, go to their school, go to their medical appointments, and go ultimately also to their home. Housing and transportation are core, and we are very happy to partner with you all and continue the conversation moving forward. And ultimately, I'll leave you with a couple of just questions to ask, which is, as we're thinking about equity as a whole, it is true we cannot just name equity. We must put equity at the forefront in written form and ultimately bring those conversations forward. And one of the questions to have folks is ultimately, some parts of our regions are growing more than others, because that is what is ultimately happening, that we continue to see Portland as a unifying city that is connecting everyone to the places that they need to live, the places that they need to be at the right time. And ultimately the question is, what can we do to make sure that as we're studying these processes, that we ultimately don't forget the question of what is it that you need, and how can we support? And I welcome you to ask those questions to our communities and EJ communities beforehand. And again, super pleased to be part of this, and also happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is John Isaacs, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Portland Business Alliance. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. The Portland Business Alliance is the Greater Portland Chamber of Commerce and the leading voice of business in the region. The Alliance takes direction from our members to advocate on their behalf at all levels of government to support commerce, community health, and the shared and sustainable prosperity for our region and our state. On behalf of our 1,900 members, I am here today to express our support for Resolution 678-79, which directs the Portland Bureau of Transportation to create a task force dedicated to evaluating pricing strategies to reduce congestion. I want to be clear that our support is not an endorsement of pricing at this time, but rather an agreement that PBOT must undergo an evaluation of pricing as a potential policy tool to help reduce congestion. And we do strongly endorse the approach of evaluating pricing in partnership with stakeholders. It is clear that policy strategies and infrastructure investments to stem increased traffic congestion is a top priority of our region's residents and businesses. In January, PBA released the results of our annual survey to assess the policy values and priorities of Portland area likely voters.
John, I don't mean to interrupt, but one thing that caught my eye in your written testimony is, what is the Portland area that you polled?
The metro region, the
three-county?
Tri-County region, and we also oversample Portland, City of Portland proper likely voters. So it's 2/3 City of Portland proper voters, and then 1/3 are the region.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, no problem. PBA has partnered with DHM Research to conduct and release this survey every year for the past decade as a service to the community in conjunction with our annual Value of Jobs economic checkup. The clear takeaway from the 2019 survey is that issues impacting our region's livability are far and away the top priority. Homelessness, the cost of housing, and increasing traffic congestion were the only issues that registered in the double digits. And while a majority of voters felt that the city and the region were on the right track, nearly two-thirds of voters said the region's livability is getting worse. In follow-up questions, nearly all survey respondents cited homelessness, housing, or traffic congestion as the reason they felt livability was declining. The survey of the entire community aligns with the results of surveys we have conducted of PBA's approximately 1,900 members. Increasing congestion has a significant negative impact on our region's businesses, and while the overall economic health of our region is currently strong, we know that the economic and environmental impacts of congestion are a significant threat to the long-term sustainability of our region's health. Congestion drives up the cost of shipping freight and goods, delivering projects on time and on budget, and impacts the competitiveness of our local retailers. And we all know too well, as many have stated here today, the significant negative impacts congestion have on the daily livability of our Portland area residents. PBA and our members are ready to get to work to partner with the Mayor, Transportation Commissioner Udaley, and the entire council and PBOT to develop new innovative strategies to stem the tide of congestion for the long-term health of our city and economy. Very recently, we have seen states and cities such as New York take important steps in overcoming historic political divides to adopt congestion management policies that include pricing. Research these policy and political breakthroughs, and you will see that one of the key factors that led to the success was the willingness of policymakers, community leaders, regulators, and the business community to collaborate to identify shared values, agree on the problem, and develop innovative solutions together. They further recognize that this is a problem that can only be solved through public-private partnerships that leverage the benefits of innovation and technology developed by the private sector. PBA and our members are ready to get to work to support and participate in a similarly collaborative process with the vision of tackling the congestion problem here in Portland. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Sarah Wright with Oregon Environmental Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Oregon Environmental Council strongly supports the development of a task force to study and recommend strategies on pricing for equitable mobility. It's great to see the city taking action, and we're pleased to see that the partnership with American Cities Climate Challenge is helping move this work forward. We are glad to see that the task force conversation is explicitly centered on equity. Our current transportation system is not equitable, and it never was. The City of Portland provides valuable resources, our publicly owned rights-of-way, to anybody to use for free. However, these free resources disproportionately provide the benefits of mobility and access to people who can drive a private car. The negative consequences of the system, air toxics, greenhouse gas emissions, physical injury and death, and more affect all of us, but they disproportionately affect people of color and people with lower incomes and less wealth. Congestion makes the existing problem worse. As Portland grows and the public streets fill up with parked and moving private cars, the impacts become even more inequitable. People who have been displaced further and further from their jobs, services, and gathering places suffer the most from delay and unreliability due to congestion. We cannot fix this system by continuing to do the same things we've done for the last 100 years. The City of Portland has innumerable goals about environmental health and economic sustainability and about equitable processes and equitable outcomes. It's time to step back and consider how we can solve the problem at hand. How do we make sure people and goods can get to the places they need to go in a way that meets those goals that we already have? Oregon Environmental Council has long been a proponent of pricing the right way. We can price our community-owned resources and make sure that the benefits of the changes go first to the most disadvantaged communities. If we center equitable outcomes, we can build a transportation system that supports clean air, climate stability, and healthy families living in economically vibrant neighborhoods. We encourage you to take this next step and convene a task force. And we agree with the Street Trust that it can't wait. So hurry up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's what I said to them, too.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Phil Wu. I am a retired pediatrician from Kaiser Permanente, and I am currently the Vice Chair of the Oregon Environmental Council Board of Directors. My comments are going to be a little different. They're going to be very specific to the health impacts of congestion pricing on air pollution, and I'm going to highlight the outcomes of a study done on the Stockholm experience around congestion pricing. That particular program focused on the health of children, specifically via childhood asthma. And so before I get into that, I want to take a few minutes, well, not a few minutes, a few seconds, and go over a primer or a review of the significance of child asthma, just so that we are all on the same page. And I think this will help set the framework for why child asthma is such an important indicator of overall health, even going into adulthood. So as some of you may know, in the United States, childhood asthma affects approximately 10% of all children. And the increases in incidence and prevalence of child asthma go up as congestion or traffic congestion has gone up. The severity of asthma is affected both by the level of pollution and the duration of exposure. So in other words, pollution has a cumulative effect that is not immediately reversed. The corollary is that a short-term decrease in pollution for whatever reason has a very small effect on the long-term course of this disease progress. As we've heard before around disparities, increase in asthma rates are very and perhaps most pronounced for people of low economic status and communities of color who disproportionately live in and around severe traffic congestion. Asthma is the most chronic inflammatory disease in children and the leading cause of hospitalization. For developing lungs, this has significant long-term impact since deficits during lung growth and development can be permanent. So as we all know, there is a very strong correlation between child asthma and adult chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, otherwise known as COPD. Children with asthma have a 12% higher risk of adult obesity. Young adults with asthma, as children, have had as much as 50% increased rates of absenteeism from school and work. And most authorities now believe that the seriousness and impact of childhood asthma must be thought of in a similar fashion to other major childhood conditions such as low birth weight, ADHD, and adverse childhood experiences. So what about the Stockholm experience? Stockholm put into place initially a trial of congestion pricing between January through July of 2006. More than a year later, the city implemented a permanent plan around congestion pricing in August of 2007. The first initial trial was studied by a group of researchers from the University of California and Princeton and others to look at what happened to air pollution and the impact on childhood, or the rates of childhood asthma in Stockholm. So they looked at nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter, or PM10 levels, as indicators of pollution from automobiles. The latter, PM10, is especially damaging to lung growth and function in children. Congestion pricing during those 7 months resulted in nitrogen dioxide levels falling by 5 to 7.5%, and PM10 levels falling by 15 to 20%. This resulted in a decrease in outpatient and inpatient visits for acute asthma by up to 15%, depending on the length of air pollution reduction. So, more improvement in asthma was seen as congestion pricing was in place longer. Those results, up to 15%, are likely to be understated because the body takes time to respond to these lower levels of pollution. So it's very likely that as time went on, those improvements would actually have been higher. It's important to note that Stockholm was already experiencing low levels of air pollution even before congestion pricing went into place. And even in that particular setting, congestion pricing had a very significant impact on asthma visits. So we could imagine that in any other city environment where pollution levels are higher, those kinds of impacts would even be greater. So in conclusion, we have hard medical evidence that demonstrates the impact of congestion pricing on a population that I think everyone in this room cares about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks all of you for your great testimony. Keelan, how many people do we have signed up for either item 678 or 679?
We have one person signed up, Phil Richmond.
Very good. Come on up. 2 minutes, please. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I didn't bring you any poetry today, but thanks for having me. My name is Phil Richmond. I'm here on behalf of the Street Trust. I'm also here to urge you to support Commissioner Udaley's efforts to curb the epidemic that's the ubiquitous reliance of our citizens on single occupancy vehicle mobility. The obvious need for changes in the status quo for Portlanders came years ago, but little has changed. Climate change is real, but without real leadership to help inform and guide our citizens into enacting changes in their day-to-day mobility choices, we may just as well all burn coal. We need this task force in order for Portland to look critically at the state's mandate for spending $500 million on freeway expansion on I-5 and 205 without consideration of whether or not such projects illustrate a history of success for its citizens, particularly those from marginalized communities. Isn't it true that much of the traffic we've seen in recent years is from out of state and in many cases are contract workers for one of two for-profit corporations? We need a transformation of our pricing mechanisms for mobility because they are currently backward. Just this past weekend, on Saturday night, I was driven downtown where the parking was free, but it cost almost $6 to get home on an e-scooter. Why does the carbon-free option cost so much more? Why is downtown parking ever free? And if not free, why so cheap? As a city, we simply can't continue to induce demand for unsustainable travel modes by keeping parking free in most places, dedicating 100% of roadway to motor vehicles only, or providing no curb space for anything but private vehicle storage. What we have is anything but equitable or sustainable. Please pass this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? The first item is a report. I'll entertain a motion for 678. We have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Hardesty. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Well, we didn't make much of a big deal about this when we were selected, so I just want to take this opportunity to let everyone know that 100 cities, 100 of the largest cities across the country were invited to apply to participate in the American Cities Climate Challenge. 25 were selected. Portland is one of them. I'm very proud of that. As was noted, we were selected, I think, based on some of our history and also current leadership. But I feel like I have to call the city out a little bit. I don't necessarily think that we deserve our kind of green badge of honor. We are in Multnomah County. Multnomah County has the worst air quality of any county in the state. So I would just say that we cannot rest on our laurels, Portlanders. We have to live up to our green reputation, and we really have to solve for congestion and climate change. We also have an increasingly racially and economically segregated city, and low-income households and communities of color bear the brunt of the impacts that we are trying to solve for. Sorry, it's my Post-it note speech again. And Noah didn't say something, which is one of my favorite kind of things that came out of this, is that we're already paying a tax or a toll. It's our time. And I figured out my toll. If I were to value my free time the same, commensurate with my pay, I would be spending, I carpool to work, I spend about 45 minutes a day longer getting to and from my home than I did years before this congestion really began increasing. And it is costing me $12,480 a year. And it is costing me over 200 hours of my life. And that is time that I could be spending with my family and friends, taking care of myself, in therapy, whatever the case may be. There are numerous things I would rather be doing than sitting in a car, although I do get to sit in a car with my executive assistant, Robin Mullins, and I love and enjoy her company. So I want to thank Bloomberg Philanthropies, the National Resource Defense Council, BPS and PBOT, Mayor Wheeler, our invited guests, and of course the community who is supporting us, informing us, guiding us, and is going to hold us accountable throughout this process. I vote aye.
Fish?
Well, Commissioner Daly, thank you for bringing this matter forward. Thanks to your team for an excellent presentation. I love
The mayor
power.
did it too.
Pardon me?
The mayor's in on it too. Let's give him a little credit.
Yeah, but he gets a trip to DC next week.
Okay, well, I'm going to London, so.
He gets all the glory. I want to give you your share of the credit. Thank you for
you.
the printouts so that I can read.
I knew you'd like that.
There is one factoid that jumped off the script to me. Vehicle hours of delay are still expected to go up by 120% by 2027. That means as bad as it is today, it's going to be twice as bad in the not-too-distant future. So we've got to act. This seems like a prudent thing to study and to take up. Thank you for all the thought and care that went into the presentation. I vote aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The report's adopted. To the next item, 679, that's a resolution. Please call the roll.
Hardesty?
Notwithstanding my concerns about ensuring that we protect the people who have been most impacted by gentrification and the lack of a quality public transit system, I am very excited about the potential of this task force and want to be very appreciative of Commissioner Udaley, ODOT, and all the folks who've been involved in making this process a reality. I also wanted to take a moment to really appreciate the folks from Noah, Shoshana, and Irene, because I know they have worked their hearts out to really engage communities who aren't traditionally engaged in these conversations early on. This, is, for me, is much about it. I believe it's as much important the process that we take as the policy that we end up with. And if the process is equitable and just from the beginning, the policy will naturally reflect that. And so I am voting yes. I look forward to the task force tackling these huge issues. And as Commissioner Fish said, if we're going to increase traffic by over 100%, we've got to have a plan, and we've got to have a plan in place very soon. I vote aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the resolution's adopted. Thank you, everyone. Next item is item number 680, please.
Declare the right to safe and legal abortion and affirm the city's commitment to act in support of that right by authorizing the city attorney to participate as an amicus in forthcoming federal lawsuits challenging abortion bans around the country.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council colleagues. I want to appreciate that this will be a unanimous resolution because all members of the City Council have signed on to it. I want to take the opportunity to also invite up our first panel that will include NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon, Kimberly Coops, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, On Do will come, Forward Together, Michelle Riffin. We will have two panels, and then I will say a little bit more before reading the resolution. Welcome. You may start.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Honorable Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners Udaly, Fish, Fritz, and Hardesty. My name is Kimberly Coops, and I'm the Policy Director at NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon. As one of the 7 in 10 Americans who support access to safe and legal abortion, and as one of many of the rural Oregonians who personally relied on abortion care in the city of Portland, I am here to testify on behalf of NARAL in support of Resolution 680. We would like to recognize Commissioner Joanne Hardesty and her staff for working with us to bring forward today's resolution, which is central to our organization's mission. We are dedicated to developing and sustaining a constituency that uses the political process to guarantee every person the right to make personal decisions regarding the full range of reproductive choices, including preventing unintended pregnancy, bearing healthy children, and choosing legal abortion. We believe everyone, especially those from communities of color, LGBTQ+ folks, trans and gender nonconforming individuals, people with lower income levels, or from immigrant families, deserve the tools to be able to make those personal decisions. Politicians in states like Alabama, Ohio, and Georgia are signing blatantly unconstitutional bills into law to restrict abortion with the explicit goal of overturning Roe v. Wade. 27 abortion bans have been enacted across 12 states so far in 2019, and just this May, Alabama's governor signed the most restrictive abortion ban in the country into law. With attacks like these, we should take action at the national level, but we should also remember last November's Measure 106. Threats to safe and legal abortion in Oregon are as real as anywhere else. This legislative session alone, anti-abortion lawmakers introduced 11 bills that would create dangerous barriers to reproductive health care access. As Oregonians, we believe that everyone should have the right to make their own personal medical decisions, and Portland already plays a critical role in abortion access. 67% of all the abortion services received in Oregon were performed in the Portland metro area. Growing up on the rural Oregon coast, I know firsthand how important Portland is for abortion access. Just over 10 years ago, I seriously questioned whether I would even be able to graduate from high school. And when I did, I realized that I had overcome the odds. The odds were an abusive relationship that started when I was 15. And the reason that I am here today and how I was able to attend college, law school, work in DC, and run for office was because I was able to have an abortion after I was sexually assaulted and leave my abusive partner. That abortion was so much more than one procedure. It was a rallying cry that I deserved to make my own decisions, that I deserved to be economically stable, to be safe, and to have children when and if I wanted to. That was my right, and that is a human right that we all have. And I'm thankful to the City of Portland for continuing to support these rights for all. In addition to folks from across the state, our city has also welcomed those who may face bans in their home states. Of the 844 people who traveled from out of state to have an abortion in Oregon, 771 of them, 91%, received services here in Multnomah County in 2017. And that is why this resolution is so important. It will support the people most impacted by two of the most egregious bans passed this year in Alabama and Ohio. Alabama just enacted a complete abortion ban that would also make performing an abortion in Alabama a felony. It even defines a fetus as a legal person for homicide purposes and compares abortion to the Holocaust. Under the Ohio ban, doctors who perform abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected could be found guilty of a 5th-degree felony and could face a suit for civil damages along with up to $20,000 in fines. These threats are real, and we applaud and support our local leaders in putting forth this important resolution that will send a message of solidarity, along with an amicus brief, to support the people living in states who are most impacted by these abortion bans. Thanks to your leadership, Portland can continue to be a beacon for people across our state and the entire country, where all people can access the full range of reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners Udaly, Fritz, Hardesty, and Fish. For the record, my name is Ann Doe. I serve as the Political Director for Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon. On the behalf of the 60,000 Oregonians we serve every year, Planned Parenthood Health Center strongly supports Resolution 680 and its move to file amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans. 1 in 4 women in this country will have an abortion in her lifetime. A patient's health should drive important medical decisions, not a politician's beliefs. These issues are between individuals, their families, and their doctors. Abortion is safe and has been legal in this country for more than 4 decades. But now our rights and freedoms hang in the balance. Since 2011, politicians have passed more than 400 new state abortion restrictions that shame, pressure, and punish those who decide to have an abortion. Just this year, an unprecedented number of extreme abortion bans are being enacted across the country. These bans would allow the state to investigate miscarriages and could jail providers, in one case for up to 99 years, simply for providing care. Meanwhile, in Missouri, politicians have tried to deny a license to the state's only health center that provides abortion care. These bans go beyond rhetoric. They have dire consequences for individuals and families across this country, and they are starting to land on governors' desks at a rapid pace. This is no coincidence. After a decades-long strategy of chipping away at abortion access state by state, the abortion bans that are sweeping the country are an attempt to ban abortion outright. This is not just an attack on the people who live in those states. This is an attack on all of us, on every single person who might and can get pregnant. There are already 13 abortion cases that are just one step away from the Supreme Court. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, 1 in 3 women of reproductive age lives in a state where abortion would be outlawed. That's more than 25 million people. This includes more than 4.3 million Hispanic and Latina women, more than 3.5 million Black or African American women, more than 800,000 Asian women, and nearly 300,000 American Indian and Alaskan Native women of reproductive age. Due to discriminatory public policy and systemic racism, people of color, queer people, and those with low incomes already face significant barriers in accessing health care. In some states, legislators have used cultural misinformation to craft restrictions used to target Asian American women's access to abortion. Meanwhile, Latinas and non-Hispanic Black women are less likely to have access to family planning services, which can result in significantly lower rates of contraceptive use. Even as rates of unintended pregnancies have dropped substantially in the past 30 years, women of color are still roughly twice as likely to experience an unintended pregnancy as white women. Marginalized communities that have been most impacted by the United States' vast income inequality are more likely to access health care through federally funded insurance plans, which are barred by the Hyde Amendment from covering abortion. For too long, the Hyde Amendment has banned Medicaid coverage of abortion, pushing access to health care because abortion is health care, out of reach for low-income individuals, especially people of color, young, and queer people. It is clear that in a world where abortion is illegal, those who already face the greatest barriers to accessing health care will further bear the brunt of the harm. Politicians are passing bans in direct defiance of the American people, whose support for access to safe, legal abortion is at an all-time high and growing. In fact, 73% of Americans say they do not want to see Roe overturned.
If these politicians truly valued life, they would get to work solving an actual public health crisis, such as a national maternal mortality rate that far outpaces other developed countries and that disproportionately impacts Black women. Banning abortion only makes a bad situation worse and puts people's lives in jeopardy. Our bodies are our own. If they are not, we cannot truly be free or equal. Now is the time to unite, voice our opposition, and fight to ensure that each of us has the ability to define our own path and the opportunity to live lives that are healthy and full. We will not tolerate this assault on our health and rights. Portland has long acted as a hub for reproductive healthcare access, with people traveling from around the state and across the country to receive care in our city. With this resolution, the City of Portland has the opportunity to send a message to the rest of the country. We value an individual's health, we value their bodily autonomy, and we will not permit an erosion of those fundamental rights. Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon thanks you for your support of Resolution 608 to protect abortion access here in Portland and across the country. We thank you for your time, leadership, and consideration in this critical matter.
Thank you for your leadership.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Michelle Ruffin, and I'm the Oregon Advocacy Manager at Forward Together. Forward Together works in Oregon and nationally to win rights, recognition, and resources for all families. We work at the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality, and are a women of color-led organization making sure that all Oregon families have access to health care, including reproductive access, including abortion access, recognition of their families, and live in safe communities. And I'm here to testify in support of Resolution 680, to file an amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans. We're really pleased to see the City Commission's action to affirm the right to an abortion. And as Oregonians, we really believe that everyone should have the right to make their own personal health care decisions, regardless of whether we are Black, brown, who we love, how much money we make, or how we are insured. But we've seen the efforts being made across the country to introduce abortion bans that would be blatantly unconstitutional. These bans already worsen structural racism that places barriers for pregnant people and women of color to access high-quality health care. Last year's Measure 106 reminded us that the threats to abortion in Oregon are as real as anywhere else. This legislative session alone, anti-abortion lawmakers introduced 12 pieces of legislation that would create dangerous barriers to reproductive health care access here at home. People of color, especially queer and transgender people of color, live at the intersection of a multitude of disparities and structural barriers. Structural barriers that often lead to a higher likelihood of being in a low-income job, low-wage job, Medicaid eligible, and subject to the harmful Hyde Amendment, which bans federal funding for abortion. People of color are also disproportionately without access to paid time off to address their health needs. These factors, combined with existing abortion restrictions that require people to find transportation, often to clinics that are very far away from them, and secure childcare, means that abortion bans make it even more difficult for people of color to access abortion care. In a world where Black women die at 3 to 4 times the rate of white women due to pregnancy-related issues, and where 1 in 5 transgender people are just denied health care access outright because of who they are, we know that more restrictive laws and accessing health care, especially reproductive services, is the wrong direction to go. Oregonians rely on Portland to be a beacon of reproductive health care access. People travel from around the state and the country to receive these services in our city. And as Kimberly said, 67% of all abortions performed in Oregon were in the Portland metro area. With more than 300, well over 300 abortion bans introduced this year alone, it's important that we take a step in the right direction for our own communities, because we know abortion is health care. By standing up to these abortion bans, we're sending a message that we stand with women of color and all pregnant people. Thank you so much. I appreciate your action on this, and of course, we support this resolution and we urge a yes vote.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
Commissioner
you
Hurst.
all. Excellent job. I'm going to call up two other invited speakers. We have Ivy Major McDowell from Apano and the Northwest Abortion Access Fund, Beth Vile. Please come up and. Welcome, please.
Good afternoon.
Either one will be fine.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mayor Ted Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Ivy Major McDowell, and I'm the Legislative Coordinator for the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, which is a statewide grassroots organization that works with Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders across the state of Oregon to advance social justice. I'm here to testify in support of Resolution 680 to file amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans and to affirm the City of Portland's commitment to protect our right to safe and legal abortion. When we started to engage our members around reproductive health, we noticed that reproductive justice was deeply linked to other issues our communities face. In particular, the impacts of healthcare exclusion and barriers on low-income families, LGBTQ folks, immigrants, refugees, and citizens of the Compact of Free Association nations of Palau, the Marshall Islands, and the Federated States of Micronesia. That's why we support the Reproductive Health Equity Act in 2017, to ensure that all Oregonians, regardless of income, citizenship status, race, gender, and sexual orientation, have access to health insurance coverage for reproductive health care. And we helped defeat Measure 106 last year, along with the No Cuts Care campaign. But our work is clearly not done. The urgency and need to work on reproductive justice remains as true today as when we started. This year alone, 378 abortion bans have been introduced, moved, or enacted in 15 states. Many of them are states with the fastest growing API populations in the US, including the states of Georgia, North Dakota, and Texas, where the API community has grown over 116% to 130% since 2000. During our own legislative session, we saw 11 anti-abortion legislation introduced by local lawmakers that would create dangerous barriers to reproductive health care access, proving that the threat to safe and legal abortion is real in our own state. We know that our communities are less likely to have affordable health care coverage and access to reproductive health services. We know that it is our communities who are often excluded or the first to be left behind. Finally, I'd like to say that these issues are deeply personal to me. As a transnational adoptee born in China, my biological parents did not have rights to reproductive justice and access to resources to raise me, so they had to give me up. While I built a beautiful life here in Oregon, the knowledge of my history and this reality inspires me to ensure that everyone has access to reproductive health care, and families are not forced to make such difficult choices. We must protect and ensure that all families have the power to choose, to make decisions about their own bodies and families in the ways that they want, here in Oregon and across the nation. I thank the leadership of Commissioner Hardesty and the City Council for introducing and supporting this resolution and for sending a clear message to the rest of the country that we won't go back. We will remain a sanctuary and a model to accessing the full range of reproductive health care that includes safe and legal abortion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. My name is Beth Vile. I live here in Portland, and I'm a board member at the Northwest Abortion Access Fund. The Northwest Abortion Access Fund is an abortion fund serving Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. We help people pay for their abortion care, help people get to and from the clinic, and we make sure people traveling for care have a safe place to stay. We are a 501c3 nonprofit and a member of the National Network of Abortion Funds, a membership organization of over 70 funds across the United States. We are a mostly volunteer organization, and we move over $300,000 each year to people in our region who are facing logistical barriers to accessing abortion. I'm here to testify in support of the resolution to file amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans. With Justice Kavanaugh's recent appointment to the Supreme Court, the fight to protect abortion access is more important than ever. We cannot do this work without you. Last year, we fielded over 2,000 calls from people who are facing logistical barriers to abortion access. We know that Portland and Seattle are beacons of reproductive health care access within our region. People travel from around the state and the country to receive abortion services in our city. That being said, though, we still have gaps. Even in Oregon, we have a shortage of providers and limited access to abortions that happen later in pregnancy. In fall 2017, I needed an abortion. Chronic health conditions made it hard to tell I was pregnant, and there was a series of events which led me to doctors feeding me misinformation. I have PCOS, and doctors told me I could never conceive. My doctor's medical assistant referred me to a crisis pregnancy center, and I was bounced from fake clinic to fake clinic, getting false counseling and a free ultrasound claiming I was 16 weeks pregnant. When I realized what was happening, I went to OHSU, and they told me I was actually 26 weeks pregnant. They informed me that they had the ability to help me, but ultimately chose not to. Because I was actually 6 months pregnant, the decision to provide me with health care was left up to a panel of physicians, and they voted no. They said they weren't comfortable with my case. So instead of being able to receive health care in my own city and sleep in my own bed those nights, I had to fly over 1,000 miles and spend over $10,000 to receive health care from people who would help me, including the Northwest Abortion Access Fund. The details of my story are rare, but the experience of having to travel outside of Oregon for abortion care is not uncommon. Oregonians are still denied based on gestation and geographic positioning, and Oregonians deserve better. Stigma and people's opinions are the only things that stood in my way, and I learned that legislation isn't everything and rights don't always equal access. The Abortion Fund is thrilled to see that this resolution declares the City of Portland remains committed to eliminating stigma surrounding abortion so that every person in our city who makes the choice to access safe and legal abortion care will feel supported, welcome, and safe doing so. This year, our Abortion Fund colleagues in New York City have successfully worked with their city to make a historic investment of $250,000 in their state's abortion fund. Last week, when I shared my story at an event in Seattle, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from Washington State indicated that she would like to see the same type of investment made in New York, made in the Northwest. I, on behalf of the Northwest Abortion Access Fund, would like to request the same of you. So call me. The resolution cannot pass soon enough. For the aforementioned reasons, I urge you to support the critical resolution to protect abortion access here in Portland and across the country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story.
How many people do we have time signed up?
I'm sorry.
Public testimony, how many people?
Yeah, we have 10 people signed up.
Very good. So the microphones move around, 2 minutes each, please, and if you could just state your name for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'll call up the first three. Mary Lou Carrera, Sahar Yarjani Marinovich, Raina Casey.
And if I may, Mayor, while they're coming up, I just want to make 2 clear points so that people understand what the resolution will do. It actually does 2 very specific things. This resolution actually allows the city attorneys to file a amicus brief to ensure that both just lost my other paper. I have it, Alabama and Ohio, that we will file an amicus brief in support of legal abortions, and so that we will be at the forefront of that. But the second thing that I think is really key is that it directs our city attorneys to build a coalition of other city attorneys so that we have a big impact across the country to make sure that other communities who believe like we do will stand up and actually fight back against these very draconian actions that are being taken. So just wanted to make sure that was on the record. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hi. Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Udaley, Commissioner Fish, and Mayor Wheeler. Thank you for having me. My name is Sahar Yarjani Muranovich, for the record. As the new executive director of the Oregon chapter of NOW, the National Organization for Women, I am here to lend my support for Resolution 680. Since 1973, anti-choice extremists have been creating a myriad of financial and logistical barriers to chip away at abortion access. With the current state of our judicial branch, our fundamental rights are under attack right now. Abortion is healthcare, and healthcare is a human right. Every single person should have the right to determine if, when, how, and with whom to grow a family. Abortion bills sweeping our country are not about family values or about the sanctity of life. They are about power over the bodies and lives of marginalized communities and are rooted in white supremacist patriarchal ideology. When undertaken by a healthcare professional, abortions are one of the safest medical procedures, safer than childbirth. Restrictions on reproductive health care don't stop abortions, they just make them unsafe. Abortion will always be available for the rich and powerful. Anti-abortion laws directly and specifically target historically oppressed communities. These laws target people like Marsha Jones in Alabama, who was charged with manslaughter after being shot in the stomach while pregnant. Thankfully, those charges were dropped after public outcry. People with low incomes, teenagers, Black and Indigenous people, and people of color, migrants and refugees, and queer and trans folks are hit hardest by these abortion restrictions, intentionally so. Abortion is a trans issue, it's a class issue, and it's a race issue. It is now more important than ever to take a stand. The world is watching. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Mayor Wheeler. My name is Mary Lou Carrera. I am a Filipino and Japanese American queer individual. I'm an organizer, facilitator, and nurse, and I am the Community Health Equity Manager at OHE, the Oregon Health Equity Alliance. We are a people of color-led collaborative organized to center and uplift the wisdom of our communities of color through racial justice-informed health equity policies and practices as part of the movement to dismantle white supremacy and shift the imbalance of power. I'm here simply because reproductive justice is a health equity issue. Equitable access to basic health care is our work, yet we recognize there are many ways in which systems intersect to create barriers to access, particularly so for people of color, LGBTQ+ people, and those at the margins. Who gets hired, who gets paid what, who is insured, has access to transit options, and gets time off. These all matter when basic health care is needed, including abortion. I'm also here today because I was 20 years old when I had my abortion. I didn't know then that my abortion would lead me to become a nurse, which led me to hospital care and outpatient abortion procedure care, or that even later, as a public health practitioner, this would lead me to advocate for racial and health equity as tools for reproductive justice. But for many people, the tools for our success aren't merely handed to you. A myriad of factors are always at play, and they always inform one another. I was very fortunate. I was able to take time off from work and school to get an abortion. I had caring and financial support from friends. I had a way to get to the health center and back home, which was necessary because of sedation medication. I also knew I needed to count on a provider to be there with medically accurate information. I needed to know the healthcare organization that provided my abortion wasn't just looking out for me, but was proactively ensuring that I was safe and had options at any point in my journey, whether that included parenthood or not. It was and is a privilege to make important decisions about my own body, about my abortion, and there is no reason we shouldn't expect to have autonomy of our bodies today. Thank you for supporting this critical resolution and for your time.
Honorable Mayor Wheeler, and Commissioner Udaley, and Hardesty. My name is Raina Casey, and I live here in Portland, Oregon. I'm here to testify in support of the resolution to file amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans. I'm also here to tell my mother's story in her absence. My mother had my older brother when she was 15. When she went to the doctor for my brother's 6-week appointment, she was told by her doctor that she was pregnant again. My mother wanted to have an abortion, but my grandmother didn't believe in it. She had a you made your bed, you lay down philosophy, and used the pregnancy as punishment for having teen sex and having sex out of wedlock. She went so far as to have my mother stand in front of the church to admit her shame. Like many people faced with similar circumstances, my mother attempted to take matters into her own hands and threw herself down a flight of stairs in an attempt to terminate her pregnancy. She sought other resources, but wasn't able to receive care, and a month and a half later, she attempted suicide. When I was 11 years old, my mother shared this story with me because she wanted me to know the pain that people go through when they aren't able to have control over their reproductive health care. I think she also wanted to somehow explain why our relationship was difficult at times. Well, I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the barriers my mother faced. It took an emotional and mental toll on her for years with those reproductive rights being taken away. I'm here today and I firmly believe that a woman should have a right to do what she wants to do with her own body. Everyone should have the right to have the healthy means to terminate their pregnancy if they so choose. By standing up against abortion bans, the City of Portland is sending a message to the rest of the country. We won't go back, and we will remain a sanctuary to access the full range of reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and City Commissioners, for your support of Resolution 608, and thank you to Commissioner Hardesty for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you.
Mayor, I made a mistake and did not invite the City Attorney Tracy Reeves to come up and make comments. So if it's okay, I would love to give her an opportunity to
Yeah,
come
you
up.
bet.
Next. Thank you. My apology.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, Mayor, Commissioner Udaly. We are thrilled to have the opportunity to participate as an amicus and support access to healthcare rights and access to abortion rights. One of our office's goals is to support the equity policies that this council and the city establishes, and we've done that often in cases where we're partnering with other cities and other jurisdictions that have like-minded policies, whether it's been our sanctuary city cases, some of our DACA cases, or a whole range of other things. We look forward to both participating on behalf of the city of Portland, but also working with other cities to build, as you say, a national coalition to address this. And we appreciate the resolution authorizing us to do this. So thank you.
Thank you. And Tracy, I just want to publicly say I really appreciate you and your immediate support and vision around this resolution. Without you being as enthusiastic as you were, we would not be here today. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's exciting work to have the opportunity to do, Commissioner. Thank you.
The next people are Dacia Graber, Ellie Schmidt, and Kristen Almy.
Good afternoon. Welcome. It's good to have you here.
Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. My name is Dacia Graber, and I'm here today as a private citizen, a mother of 4, a healthcare provider, and an advocate for safe, accessible reproductive care. I'm here to testify in support of the resolution to file amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans. As you have heard today, 27 abortion bans have been enacted across 12 states so far in 2019 alone. Alabama's governor signed into law the most restrictive abortion legislation in the United States, banning abortion in nearly all circumstances, including rape and incest. The only exception to the ban are cases in which a woman's health is at serious risk. We may think that here in Oregon, we are safe from these threats, that these draconian and cruel laws won't ever apply here. But last year's Measure 106 reminded us that there continue to be threats to safe and legal abortion in Oregon. In this legislative session alone, anti-abortion lawmakers introduced 12 pieces of legislation that would create dangerous barriers to healthcare access. Oregon can do better. We must not only hold the line, but be a beacon of reproductive healthcare access. Furthermore, we must not be afraid or fearful to state that we will never compromise safe and legal abortion care access, not only for the women of this state, but for this country. And in Oregon, Portland is the region where women come for safe, accessible abortion services. 844 people in 2017 traveled from out of state for abortion care, and of those 844, 771, or 91%, chose to come to Multnomah County. Here is a powerful opportunity for the City of Portland to send a message to the nation. We respect a woman's right to choose and to care for her body as she decides. We refuse to return to an era of illegal back alley procedures where women died seeking safe haven and help in their greatest moments of need and vulnerability. We believe in the power of a woman's choice, and we will remain a proud sanctuary to a full range of reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners Udaly, Hardesty, and Fish. My name is Ellie Schmidt, and I'm a third-year medical student at Oregon Health Science University here in Portland. I am here to testify in support of the resolution to file amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans. As a medical student, I know that abortion is healthcare, and healthcare is a fundamental human right. In fact, when we do our OBGYN rotations, we not only learn about labor and delivery, we learn about providing abortion care. Because just like carrying a pregnancy to term, abortion is an option that should be available to all those who can become pregnant. As a medical student, I have seen firsthand that there are indeed many reasons that women seek abortion care. The only consistent theme I have noticed is that each decision is personal. It is essential that people who become pregnant have access to a full spectrum of care that is safe, dignified, and which allows them to retain their autonomy. Abortion bans like those passed in Alabama and Ohio stigmatize abortion and further an inflammatory and false narrative about reproductive health care. I'm thankful to Commissioner Hardesty for her leadership in this resolution and to Mayor Wheeler and every commissioner for their support, because it's time that we not only protect abortion care, but that we normalize it. We should be expanding reproductive rights, not taking them away. With policies like the Reproductive Health Equity Act and no restrictions on access to safe and legal abortion, Oregon is the most pro-choice state in the nation, and a beacon of hope for those across the country who are facing unprecedented attacks on their bodily autonomy and agency. I applaud the Portland City Commissioners for not only fighting against the Ohio and Alabama abortion bans, but for ensuring that Portland continues to be a leader in protecting reproductive health care access. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Kristen Alme, and I'm a member of the steering committee for the leadership and advocacy team of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon. Our organization fights to ensure all Oregonians have access to safe, medically accurate health care, including abortion, regardless of your race, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. I'm here to testify in support of the resolution to file amicus brief in opposition to state abortion bans. This resolution is so important because of the 27 abortion bans that have already been enacted across 12 states so far in 2019, with potentially more to come if Roe versus Wade is overturned. And as we saw with Measure 106 last year, we're not safe in our state either. As an advocate of accessible and medically accurate healthcare, we can see the impact that these bans have on medical providers as well as the folks that need access to abortion. In both Alabama and Ohio, doctors who perform abortion may face felony charges. Meanwhile, health centers in Georgia and Alabama have been flooded by women calling, scared that they're going to lose their appointments or no longer have access to abortion. So many calls were received during this time that they had to set up additional lines just to be able to manage the volume. Enacting this city resolution will ensure that Portland will continue to be a beacon of reproductive health care access. And by standing up against these abortion bans, the city of Portland is sending a message to the rest of the country: we're not going back, and will remain that sanctuary of access to the full range of reproductive health care, including safe and legal abortion. I stand before you not only as a representative of the leadership and advocacy team for Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, but as a person who firmly believes that abortion is health care. I urge you to support this critical resolution and to protect abortion access here in Portland and across the country.
Thank you.
Cordelia Newberry, Katrina Dowdy, and Samantha Gladue. The final person to testify is Elisa Bang.
Good afternoon.
Come up if you want, this is the fourth chair.
Oh, yeah. Hold on, the last person.
Oh, please start. Start. Somebody.
Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, my name is Katrina Dowdy. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers, and I was recently elected to the Multnomah Education Service District Board of Directors.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I live in Portland, and I'm here to testify in support of the resolution to file amicus briefs in opposition to state abortion bans. In my day job, I work for 211 Info as the maternal and child health coordinator, helping Oregonians determine what resources are available and what reproductive health care options they have. I get calls every day from folks across the Pacific Northwest, calls of people who are lacking access to the care they need and deserve. As Oregonians, we believe that everyone should have right to make their own personal medical decisions, regardless of their race, their gender identity, who they love, how much money they make, their field of work, or how they are insured. However, we've seen the recent headlines. Legislators across the country are introducing bills to restrict abortion that, if passed, would be blatantly unconstitutional. These bills have a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable and targeted Americans, including those who already face the most significant barriers in accessing reproductive health care. Queer people need abortions. Reproductive health care is a right, and a right that everyone should have access to. LGBTQIA2S+ people depend on healthcare services offered by facilities that provide abortion access, like Planned Parenthood. Researchers have consistently found that queer people are more likely to experience poverty than non-queer people, and there is an even more severe disparity for queer folks of color. Because impoverished people are more likely to rely on safety net clinics and healthcare facilities that provide abortion, closing these clinics means severing some of the most marginalized within our community from accessible healthcare. Oregonians rely on Portland to be a beacon for reproductive justice. I call for your support.
Thank you.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Cordelia Newbury, and I'm a member of the steering committee for Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon's Leadership and Advocacy Team. On the PPAOLAT, we galvanize our communities to fight for reproductive justice across Oregon, including the assurance that all Oregonians have access to safe, quality, non-judgmental health care, including abortion, regardless of race, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. I'm here to testify in support of Resolution 680 and its directive to file amicus briefs in the opposition to state abortion bans. This resolution is so important because as Oregonians, we believe that everyone should have the right to make their own personal medical decisions. And we've seen the recent headlines mentioned earlier. Legislatures across the country are introducing bills to restrict abortion that would be blatantly unconstitutional, such as Alabama's governor, who recently signed into law the most restrictive abortion legislation in the United States. This legislation bans abortion in nearly all circumstances, including rape and incest. Planned Parenthood providers need this resolution enacted in Portland so we can continue to serve our communities with medically accurate, safe, economically accessible, and non-discriminatory medical care. Abortion bans are also racial, LGBTQ+, and economic injustices. People of color live at the intersection of a multitude of structural and economic barriers, including disproportionately living without access to paid time off to address their health needs. These factors, combined with existing abortion restrictions, make it even more difficult for people of color to access abortion care. Also, researchers have consistently found that queer people are more likely to experience poverty than non-queer people. And because impoverished people are more likely to rely on healthcare facilities that provide abortion, closing these clinics means severing some of the most marginalized within our community from accessible healthcare. Enacting Resolution 680 would ensure that Portland will continue to be a beacon of reproductive justice and economically accessible, medically accurate healthcare. As has been stated, in 2017, 844 people traveled from out of state to have an abortion in Oregon, and 91% came to Multnomah County. Our city needs to take a resolute stand protecting access to safe, medically accurate, and economically affordable reproductive health care. We need to do this to serve Oregonians, to provide access to our neighbors, and to stand proudly as a beacon of reproductive justice. Thank you all for supporting this critical resolution and protecting abortion access here in Portland and across the country.
Thank you.
All right, my name is Samantha Gladue. I'm in my day job the executive director of the BUS Project, and I'm here in my role as a board member at the Northwest Abortion Access Fund, where I've been a volunteer since 2012 and a board member since 2015. And you've heard from Beth, my colleague, already about abortion funds and what we do, and you've heard from everyone all these great points, so I'm going to keep it really brief and just say that we know that abortion access elsewhere impacts abortion access here in Portland, Oregon. Bans in other states contribute toward confusion, barriers to care, and the necessity for people to have to travel from their homes to places like Portland and Seattle to get abortion care. And by passing this resolution, the City of Portland is affirming values of love, compassion, autonomy, and collective power. By directing the city attorney to monitor, engage, and build coalitions around abortion bans, the city is telling Portlanders and all women and people who can become pregnant that you've got their back. So I want to thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, and the team at NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon and the city attorney for bringing this forward today, and to the rest of the council for your unanimous support. Real pumped to see you pass it.
Thanks.
Hey everyone, my name is Alyssa Bang. Pronouns she, her. I'm trans, I'm indigenous, I'm queer. I can't have kids, so yeah. But I'm the co-founder of Portland's Liberation. The reason I'm speaking before you all today is that I've been asked to deliver a message to the mayor from the people of Portland. We are sick of the ineptness of our local leadership when it comes to anti-fascist domestic terrorist groups such as Rose City Antifa.
I'm sorry, this
who
is
attack
off,
any-
this is off subject. You're out of order.
Wrong meeting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Just finally address it, please, because people are getting hurt.
Not now.
Have a good day.
Any
Wow.
further public testimony? Thank you all for your testimony.
experience. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Indeed, it was authentic. It was
Wouldn't it be
authentic.
complete without a disruption?
And I kind of knew, I was waiting, I just kind of figured.
You know, it just wouldn't have been a complete day without it.
Because it's been such a smooth day so far, I was beginning to feel like people liked us or something.
Keelan, does that complete public testimony?
Yes.
Very good. Colleagues, any further discussion or questions prior to calling the roll on the resolution? Keelan, please call the roll.
Would you like me to
Hardesty.
read the resolution?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, please do that
Read
again.
the resolution. Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Go ahead.
Okay. So the resolution is as follows. Declaring the right to safe and legal abortion and affirming the cities of Portland's commitment to act in support of that right by authorizing the city attorney to participate as a amicus in forthcoming federal lawsuits challenging abortion bans around the country. Whereas state governments across the nation are passing laws that expressly or effectively ban abortion in those states. And whereas Oregon is the only state with no additional statutory restrictions on abortion. And whereas the city of Portland has a history of supporting the right to abortion predating Roe versus Wade and has continued to lobby at the federal level for increased access to abortion services. And whereas the city of Portland provided to city employees municipal insurance coverage for abortion services prior to the passage of the Oregon Reproductive Health Equity Act, which required that insurance cover abortion services. And whereas the city of Portland has been a champion of progressive measures dedicated to increasing access to the full range of reproductive health services, such as mandated employer-provided paid sick leave prior to it being codified by the state, and protections against discrimination based on pregnancy and gender identity. And whereas Oregon House Bill 3391, the Reproductive Health Equity Act of 2017, codified the right to safe and legal abortion in the state of Oregon. And whereas every person who can become pregnant needs access to the full range of safe, affordable, and comprehensive reproductive health care services throughout their life, including but not limited to screening for cancer and sexually transmitted infections, contraceptive services, abortion care, prenatal care, labor and delivery services, and postpartum care. And whereas various states have proposed legislation that would prevent a person who can become pregnant from obtaining an abortion as early as 6 weeks after the first day of their last menstrual period, when a person is often not aware of their pregnancy. And whereas some of this legislation also threatens healthcare providers with prison time of up to 99 years and fines for performing abortions in their capacity as medical professionals. And whereas such legislation will have profoundly negative impacts on the health of people who can become pregnant by violating long-held constitutionally protected rights and effectively eliminating access to all safe and legal abortion services. And whereas since 1976, federal legislation known as the Hyde Amendment has prohibited the use of federal funds, specifically Medicaid funds, for abortion services, and due to systems of structural racism, socioeconomic inequality, low income, and people of color are disproportionately likely to be insured by Medicare, which therefore means that they are disproportionately likely to be subject to the restrictions of the Hyde Amendment, limiting their access to safe abortions and, it's a long one. Whereas the lack of consistent and affordable access to health quality contraceptive services in low-income communities and communities of color reinforces the disproportionate impact of restrictions on safe and legal abortions. And whereas such laws, while simultaneously eliminating safe and legal options for abortion and potentially driving people who become pregnant to illegal abortion providers who are unregulated and subject to no safety standards, further risking the health of people who are pregnant. And whereas Oregon voters rejected Measure 106 in 2018, which would have denied insurance coverage for abortion to the most vulnerable Oregonians, including those who serve the city of Portland and other public employees, as well as those who rely on the Oregon Health Plan. And whereas opposition to abortion has long been entrenched with sexism and misogyny, and the right to an abortion and control of one's own body remains one of the few ways people who can become pregnant are able to effectively exercise control over their lives and reproductive health. And whereas the passage and implementation of policies that have no basis in medicine are reflective of a hyper-focus on birth and a compulsion to control people who are able to become pregnant, but which do little to alleviate the physical, emotional, and financial burden of child rearing. And whereas policymakers should instead focus on the maintenance and expansion of supportive services whose aim is the reduction of unintended pregnancies, preventing sexual violence, and promoting individual bodily autonomy and the success of all families by investing in comprehensive sexual health education, access to full range of reproductive health care, paid family and medical leave, and high-quality, affordable child care. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City of Portland unequivocally condemns any attempt to restrict, prohibit, or otherwise impede access to safe and legal abortion care. Access to safe and legal abortion services is vital to the health of people who can become pregnant and our broader community. And be it therefore resolved, the City of Portland remains committed to eliminating stigma surrounding abortion so that every person in our city who makes the choice to access safe and legal abortion care will feel supported, welcome, and safe doing so. Likewise, the City of Portland will continue to stand with healthcare providers and organizations that provide essential, high-quality, and affordable reproductive health care and sexual health education to thousands of Portland residents, with or without insurance coverage and regardless of citizenship status. And be it therefore resolved, the City Council directs the City Attorney to monitor suits that may arise from the Ohio Senate Bill 23 and Alabama's state's expansive legislation restricting abortion rights, as well as other restrictive abortion legislation. And if suit is filed, directs the city attorney evaluate opportunities to participate as an amicus and authorizes the city attorney to seek to participate as an amicus in litigation challenging the legality of these laws at the time and in the cases the city attorney believes to be the most effective and strategically valuable. Additionally, The city attorney is encouraged to reach out to and work with attorneys representing other states and local governments across the country to build a coalition of amici, is that right? Willing to participate in legal challenges to these and other laws limiting access to abortion services. And be it therefore resolved, the City Council requests the Office of Government Relations deliver copies of this resolution upon adoption to the Governor of Oregon, the Speaker of Oregon State House of Representatives, and the President of the Oregon State Senate, and to any other interested parties. Therefore, adopted by the council, by us. That is the resolution, and we should be proud to be a city council that is playing a leadership role in passing a legislation, a resolution of this sort.
Thanks, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Hardesty.
I gotta talk again?
You have to vote yes.
I gotta
after
vote,
that.
yeah, right. I don't know, should I vote yes? Thank you. I want to take a moment, though, to thank all the brave people who came and shared their personal story. It takes a lot of guts to share stories that are so personal, so publicly. And I want to thank each and every one of you who took the time to do that. This is a very emotional issue, but everybody spoke with compassion and empathy and love. And I just want to acknowledge that and appreciate that, and I wholeheartedly vote yes.
Udaley.
Well, colleagues, I know it's been a long day and we want to get out of here, but this is a really important moment and I have a few brief remarks, but I'm going to talk a lot faster than usual. Reproductive freedom and justice is essential to bodily autonomy, to full equality, and to our very destiny. After all, some of us would not be here had our own mothers not had the choice of when and how they wanted to become parents. Some of us would not have the beautiful children we do had we not had the right to choose when we would become mothers. And some of us would not be here at all had we been forced to carry dangerous pregnancies to term or endured the trauma of enforced motherhood. You don't have to like abortion to support reproductive freedom, and if you don't like it, you can support proven methods of preventing unwanted pregnancies, from comprehensive sex education in schools to affordable, easy-to-access birth control, to raising your sons to take as much responsibility for unplanned pregnancies as you do your daughters. Reproductive freedom, with that, I'd like to encourage anyone, and this is really more for the benefit of anyone who might be watching, who hasn't already done so, to read the essay by Gabrielle Blair, a New York Times bestseller, designer, and Mormon mother of 6, called Men Cause 100% of Unwanted Pregnancies. Which I wasn't convinced when I started, but I'm pretty sure it's true now that I read it. Which challenges the placement of the burden of the responsibility on women and provides women and others who can become pregnant, and provides a much-needed perspective shift and reality check that should leave everyone questioning their assumption about responsibility. I also want to thank those of you who came today to share your story. It has broken my heart over and over again to hear and read people sharing incredibly painful and personal stories as part of our defense strategy and imploring the public and policymakers to not take away our rights. I'm grateful for the reproductive freedoms that I have been guaranteed by my feminist foremothers, including abortion, and I'm looking forward to the fast approaching day when I will no longer have to manage my own fertility. But I really am, believe me, I can't wait. I will continue to fight like hell to the end of my days to protect those rights for the generations coming up behind us. I vote aye.
Fish.
I think it's worth noting that we're having this hearing today while a panel of federal judges is contemplating whether to set aside Obamacare, and particularly the pre-existing conditions, protections that those of us living with chronic illnesses enjoy. So it's a perilous day for healthcare in America. To our newest colleague, Commissioner Hardesty, thank you for taking the lead on this resolution, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor with all of my colleagues. To NARAL and Planned Parenthood, Northwest Abortion Access Fund, and all the other groups that came out today and the individual voices who testified, thank you for being present today to lend your moral weight behind what we're doing. I am proud to live in a state that protects a woman's right to reproductive health care. I have a 26-year-old daughter. I want her to live in a country where she has the freedom to make her own health care choices. Today is a small step in the direction of making a large statement about our values. I'm pleased to vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I usually end my remarks with thank yous to the council members who lead and to the members of the community who are there and directly involved. Today, I want to start with both a thank you and an acknowledgement. With Commissioner Hardesty's tenure, we now have for the first time a city council that is majority women. And the fight against reproductive rights and reproductive health is most notably led, on the other hand, by cisgendered men who seek to control both women and people who can become pregnant. And I believe we have not listened enough to the stories and the voices of women and people who can become pregnant. So I'm very appreciative that we've had this opportunity here in our chamber to do so. I'd like to thank first and foremost Commissioner Hardesty for the hard work you've put into this and bringing this forward. City Attorney Tracy Reeve for what I know will be excellent legal representation going forward. NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon, Forward Together in Apano for working to bring this resolution before the Portland City Council today. As I look at the makeup of the council, I think it's very important to note that this initiative, this resolution today has been led by a woman, and accordingly I want to keep my remarks as brief as I possibly can. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate for the airwaves to be crowded by male voices, particularly on this issue. But there are a couple of comments I'd like to make. First of all, I think it's important that as men, we find the opportunities to speak up in support of women and people who can become pregnant. I think it's also important that we acknowledge that we are not immune from the ramifications of restrictive abortion laws that are fundamentally about ensuring births at all costs with little and in some cases no regard for the quality and health of the lives that are impacted. A person's right to safe and legal abortion services has been enshrined in constitutional law in this country for over 4 decades. And we're seeing that the landscape in 2019 is fundamentally different than the landscape that we've seen in previous years. In previous years, yes, of course, there were bills introduced intending to restrict abortion rights. Those measures, for the most part, failed. But as testimony indicated today, what we're seeing that's completely different is measures passing in multiple states, including complete outright bans on abortion, as in the case of the state of Alabama. Left out of some of the abortion analyses are the following considerations: the number of children who live in poverty in this country, child food insecurity rates, which continue to grow, the percentage of household income that goes towards child care, and according to the federal government, anything beyond 7% is considered unaffordable. Child care costs relative to the overall cost of rent, access to prenatal care, not just across states, but even across counties, and infant mortality rates, and whether these states have maternity or family leave laws. All too often, these issues are completely left out of the conversations. And yet, advocates for these bills steel themselves against criticism by claiming, cynically, that these bills are in the defense of human rights. The threats being levied against the right to safe and legal abortions, they are real and they are dangerous. And collectively, we need to continue fighting back. I want you to know that I will continue to be a fully engaged ally, and I'll do my part. I vote aye. The resolution's adopted. Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, you want to take a 2-minute break? 5-minute break it is. We are in recess.
I'm out of here.
please read items 681, 82, and 83?
681, authorized contracts with Kaiser Health Plan of the Northwest, Vision Service Plan Insurance Company, Moda Health Plan, Inc., Oregon Dental Service, DBA Delta Dental Plan of Oregon, and Standard Insurance Company from July 1st, 2019 through June 30, 2024, as administratively required by Bureau of Human Resources for the city's self-insured and insured plan offerings beginning July 1, 2019.
Colleagues, these ordinances are related to the city's employee benefits program. The set of contracts with health insurance providers that are before you today are the result of an RFP process and negotiations that the Bureau of Human Resources carried out over the course of the past year, working with the city's benefit consultants and members of the Labor Management Benefits Committee. Kathy Bless is here. She's the Deputy Chief Human Resources Officer who will walk us quickly through these three ordinances. Good afternoon.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. We'll need to read the next two as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we not get, I apologize.
The first one
Please,
was really
go
long.
ahead.
Sorry.
Not my fault, not yours.
Okay, 682, authorized contract renewal with Aon Consulting, Inc. for employee benefits consultant services through June 30, 2024, in an amount not to exceed $3,811,105. 683, amend the City of Portland Employee Benefits Program to reflect necessary plan design changes as recommended by the Labor Management Benefits Committee and as administratively required by the Bureau of Human Resources for the city's plan offerings beginning July 1, 2019.
That's much better. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
No, we're going to do 684 separately at the end.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and
Afternoon.
Commissioners. Again, I'm Kathy Bless, Deputy Chief Human Resources Officer with BHR. I will tee it up, three ordinances within this time certain, and then we will offer our balance of the time to the Fire Bureau and you, Commissioner Hardesty, for the next ordinance. Item 681 authorizes the contracts with Kaiser Health Plan, Vision Service Plan, Moda Health Plan, Oregon Dental Service, and Standard Insurance. Item 682 is authorizing a contract renewal with Aon Consulting to ensure the continuation of consistent actuarial support and negotiation on behalf of the healthcare plans. The last is item 683, which amends the city's plan design and plan document for the 2019-20 plan year. This is the portion in which Labor Management Benefits Committee makes recommendations to council. We include those changes within the plan document. There were minimal changes this year. We did waive all mental health co-pays under all plans so that we could remove barriers and support the mental health initiative that's rolling out next week. And then we also implemented a telehealth option through OHSU at a $10 copay. If you have any questions,
Very
I'm
good,
here
colleagues.
to
Any questions?
answer.
Is there any public testimony on 681, 82, or 83?
We have one person signed up, Yasmin Ibarra.
Very good. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. This is my first time actually providing testimony before
Well,
the
welcome.
council. I'm usually behind the scenes. My name is Yasmin. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. My name is Yasmin. I'm the Political and Governmental Affairs Liaison for SEIU Local 49. I'm here today because you all are voting on a large contract with Standard Insurance, and we believe that this company is not aligned with the city's commitment to providing great jobs for our community. Standard Insurance owns the Standard Plaza and the Standard Insurance Center buildings in downtown, and up until this month, those buildings were being cleaned by a union janitorial company. Those union jobs allowed for workers to have fair wages, affordable health care, and important worker protections. And unfortunately, Standard decided to go with a non-union company, laying off 15 workers of whom we represent. The company that I decided to go with is Millennium Building Services, and in my testimony, I provided a couple of examples of the problems that workers have encountered with this company. We believe that Standard Insurance switching from a union company to a non-union company is really undermining the work that janitors in our region have fought really hard to raise. I have a picture of Adela here. I'm sure that you all have seen Adela. She is a janitor who's a leader in our union. She worked for the Standard Insurance building for 9 years and with a union janitorial company for 19 years. And she's one of those 15 people who's gonna lose their jobs. I'm here because I believe the city should be prioritizing and working with companies that provide good jobs for our community and that are reflective of the city's values. And on behalf of these 15 workers and their families, I'm asking that the city reach out to the Standard Insurance Company and ask them to restore its contract with the union company and be more in alignment with the city's commitment to good jobs.
I have a couple questions, Mayor.
Commissioner Fish, yeah, sure. Thank
So,
you.
first of all, this is your first testimony?
Yes.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
And did you notice she was right on the buzzer?
Right on
as well?
time.
That's
I was trying real hard.
We hope you set an example for some of the people that come here and manage to give their testimony while the thing is going, every bell and whistle is going off. So your request is that we reach out to the Standard to discuss this decision. And this council is on record as strongly supporting justice for janitors and the campaign to bring fair wages and benefits, whether it's a union or non-union context, to janitors in the city of Portland. So I think that's a fair request. I don't have a formal statement from the Standard on this issue. I'll check my mail when I go back, so we have your appeal. And I think this is an emergency item because we're required to put into place these things so that we have continuity in our healthcare. But I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to put this marker down. And I see no reason why the city can't pursue this on a dual-track basis, which is proceed with the recommendations from our committee while also engaging the Standard on this issue of who they choose to hire as janitors. And we're also collectively aware of the fact that if the percentage of people providing services in Portland falls below a certain amount, it affects everyone's ability to get health care.
That's right.
So this is an issue near and dear to my heart. You have my commitment that I will work with SEIU to engage this issue. And I appreciate that you've decoupled the two issues, that you haven't said, no, don't proceed with the recommendation today, but at the same time you said, would we make an overture? And you have my commitment to do that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Excuse me,
Commissioner
Mayor.
Hardesty, then Commissioner Daly.
Thank you. Could we bring, I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Kathy Bless.
Kathy back up so that we can get Kathy on the record to find out what Kathy's going to do as she's moving this contract forward?
Well, Kathy doesn't have anything to do with janitors.
No, but she's going to be the one negotiating the contract, right? I mean, what we're doing is actually approving this contract, right? And they're going to be moving it forward. So I just want to know how much time we have between the time we approve this and the time it's actually signed. July 1? Is it past July 1? I guess it is, isn't it? It's July 10th. Okay, so what's your recommendation for us?
You have my commitment to absolutely take this forward and work with the commissioner and the mayor's offices to address this within Standard Insurance.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that, but I want us to be really proactive. I believe that we as a city council have been really clear that we value union employment, right? We value good wages, we value healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Why are you getting a little nervous over there?
Because we can't dictate union employment. We advocate for standards of adequate wages and benefits.
Right.
When we intrude into the conversation by insisting that it be union versus non-union, we've gone beyond the scope of what we've done historically, because that's interfering with the right of workers to make that judgment.
I appreciate that, but we can certainly advocate for a living wage and healthcare and vacation and all the things that are associated with taking care of employees, right?
That's why, Commissioner, consistent with SEIU's previous overtures to us on this issue, and the request that was made by the organizer, I was hoping I was speaking for the council and saying, at the leadership level, we will take this up. and engage the standard on this issue, which was the request. Kathy's job is to provide the healthcare benefits, and I just wanted to keep them separate.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Just want to make sure everybody's on the record, having the same value system in place. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes.
Great. For somebody who is testifying for the first time, you certainly got everything all riled up. Well done.
And she did it with a smile the whole time.
Come back weekly, and we'll put you on first, just so we'll sort of set a
She's good.
standard for
She's good.
testifying.
Commissioner Udaly.
I got somewhere to go, people. I just want to say, similar to Commissioner Fish, I need a little more information, but certainly supportive of your concerns, and let's follow up.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions on 81 to 83? Please call the roll. Keeling on 681 ordinance.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fish?
Kathy, thanks for all the great work you do, and also for putting in place a flexible spending account process this year, which is 10 times easier to use and to access than the ones we've had in the past. You and I have had this conversation on an ongoing basis. Really appreciate your responsiveness and the way you manage this process. Aye.
Thank you.
Wheeler?
Great job, Kathy. I've been asked by Commissioner Fritz to read her statement as a courtesy. I will thank you for reading the statement into the record while I visit my mother in England. I hope my colleagues on the council will support my request to the Labor Management Benefits Committee to explore options for improving fertility coverage for City of Portland employees in this upcoming fiscal year. As an employer of choice, the city commits itself to attracting, developing, and retaining a diverse, culturally competent, fully engaged workforce providing excellent public services. In my time on the council, we have added inclusive benefits for city employees, including paid sick leave, paid parental leave, including foster and adoptive parents, cognitive behavioral therapy for autism, and transgender health care. There are often huge financial barriers to fertility care, which has negative impacts on income as well as an employee's mental health as they navigate the complex journey of trying to start a family. At the same time, the cost burden to the city is likely to be minimal. In Massachusetts, the state with the most comprehensive mandate for infertility coverage, the cost of coverage was one of the lowest amongst its mandated benefits at just $2.49 per member per year. There are also disproportionate impacts of this coverage on single and LGBTQ+ parents, in particular through fertility care needs, though fertility care needs are not exclusive to these communities. Fertility is a fundamental part of healthcare and should be accessible to everyone, regardless of age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, or marital status. My staff and I look forward to supporting the LMBC's pursuit of improved benefit options in this area. That from Commissioner Fritz. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Item 682, please call the roll.
Hardesty?
682.
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. 683, call the roll.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaly?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. Read item
Thank you.
684, our last bit of business. Thank you, Kathy.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Health and Science University in an amount not to exceed $250,000 for medical wellness director services for Portland Fire and Rescue firefighters.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I am so excited to have my fabulous interim fire chief here to discuss this new benefit that we're making sure will be in place and the wonderful partnership we're creating with OHSU. Take it away.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Gillespie, Interim Fire Chief for Portland Fire and Rescue. I know you've had a very busy day, so I will be brief here. The ordinance today is to add a critical piece of the International Association of Firefighter, International Association of Fire Chief Wellness Fitness Initiative into our health and wellness program. This IGA with OHSU will provide physician oversight and referral capabilities to our firefighters. They will also be analyzing data to determine risk factors and to suggest mitigating practices to reduce injuries and illnesses within our workforce. Beside me here, I have Janet Woodside, who is our EMS program manager. She's been with Portland Fire and Rescue for close to 20 years and has been taking the lead in our health and wellness program for our firefighters. She's done an incredible amount of work in moving us forward in this arena, and we would be happy to take any questions that you have
I have one
about this
question.
IGA.
Can you think of any reason why this council should not support this ordinance?
No.
Okay, I'm ready to vote.
Great, all right, moving right along.
Any other questions? Commissioner Hardesty?
No.
Commissioner Daly? Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Call the roll.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Daly,
Very happy to support this. We all need to take better care of ourselves, but especially our first responders. I vote aye.
Fish,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
My apologies, you had to be here so long to get that.